throughout the day. I've asked them to hit really the highlights of their budget, any major variances in the line items from current fiscal year to the next fiscal year proposal, and operating capital. Really just leave space for any questions from the board. And I try my best guess on timing, but I've got everyone else on cell phones, so we'll keep it flowing the best we can.
Yeah, great. So,
Great. Well, good morning.
good morning.
And I'm happy to say the library is back to pre-pandemic level of service, which took a while. In FY23, we had over 45,000 patrons visit, which was up 22% from the year before. We circulated 128,000 items, and programming attendance was 11,900. So that was up 7% from the previous year. When we look at ourselves, compare ourselves to other Vermont libraries, the Department of Libraries issues annual statistics of public library data. Looking at that data for FY22, we serve the 13th largest population in the state. And we rank 4th in circulation, and we rank #1 at attendance in programs that year. So we're pretty busy, happening place, which is great to be. Of course, our challenges continue with space constraints as Williston continues to grow, which you've heard a lot about through the scoping study. Our event space, our meeting space, collection size, and accessibility to collections are ongoing challenges for us. Our outreach program has developed into a very robust program using Dottie the Bookmobile to visit neighborhoods. The circulation at neighborhoods was up 86% from 2019, and visits on board were up 81% from 2019. So she's been doing a lot of other outreach outside of those statistics as well at events like Trunk or Treat. The outreach librarian works all year round to visit homebound and senior communities to give them the library services that some of them can't get because they don't drive and they don't have access to public transport to get to the library. So that outreach piece really is filling a gap. And it is at capacity, as you know, it's on a 27-hour position. So that's something to look at as a challenge going forward. So jumping into the operation budget, the proposal is 4.47 overall. Salary and benefits represents a 5% increase.
Can people say what page they start on?
83.
Yeah, okay.
Which I was happy to have the page numbers this year. In previous years, we finally figured it out. I wrote them down because we never knew where we were. So, yeah, just to highlight department salary and benefits, overall 5% increase. That includes a request for an additional 250 substitute hours. We have received feedback over the years that especially young families and seniors would like the library to open earlier at 9 a.m. Currently, we open at 10 a.m. Monday to Saturday. So by adjusting staff hours and the additional 250 substitute hours, we would like to implement opening at 9 a.m. starting after Labor Day. So hopefully that will, well, obviously it'll add 6 hours a week to our operational hours. The jumping ahead, page 84. Just to highlight a few things on the books line, which is obviously a major line for us, core to our mission of literacy and lifelong learning. There's a 5% increase here. The digital resources at 35,200, that's a 17% increase from the previous year. The a challenge with the digital resources are publisher models and increasing prices and also increasing usage. So from FY22 to 23, we saw a 26% increase in e-audiobook usage in the library. And that's a trend nationwide, that people are really enjoying e-audiobooks. Obviously, as that happens, our traditional formats like books on CD, usage is declining, as you know, CD players aren't in many cars anymore. So every year we look at that budget and kind of shift more to the streamed. That's one big change. Print continues to be robust and strong. So, you know, we budget for 5%, 7% actually each year on that. So overall, with the shifting, we were able to keep the increase on that line to 5%. Bookmobile, in a small increase there. As she ages, there's more maintenance required. Page 85. Computer applications, these are our software, our catalog software. And that it's always a difficult prediction with software. Again, we were lucky, we were able to keep it to 5% as Microsoft designated us as a nonprofit, and we're now getting the Office 365 suite for free. So that saved us $1,500, which was nice, keeping that, that line at 5%. Telephone, I think that's a broader issue.
Yeah, telephone is primarily, we have POTS lines, we have First Light Fiber, and the POTS lines, plain old telephone service. They're copper lines, and they just keep going up. I mean, 3 times a year. Since I've been here, they started at $35 a line. They're now up to $100 a line, and we're just going to notice that they're going to increase them again. So that is the majority of the increase in the phone service.
Mm-hmm. And we are moving our fax line over to the same line.
Yep.
And I think that will save a little bit, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's in progress.
You have a fax line? Does anybody have those anymore?
Well, yeah, no, you do for banking and health.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's the only way they'll send and receive information. So the library having a fax line is key because most people don't have a fax
Right.
line, and Staples charges a lot to send per page. So it's pretty regularly used. It's part of the training when new students come on. It's how to
What it is.
of a telephone and what exactly is a fax line. So it's good training for them. The building overhead lines, there's actually a 4% decrease overall on these lines because the town custodial services and benefits have been moved back to the buildings and grounds department. If it hadn't been for that, it probably would have been about a 5% increase on the line overall. Okay, and that's about it that I wanted to highlight for the operations. Any questions?
Questions from the board?
so what was it overall?
4.47%.
And the major changes you're adding, by shifting employees around, you can add an hour, but you need a sub to make sure that you can cover everything when you do that.
Yeah, being open an extra 6 hours,
Yeah, that's
you know, it means we're open 55 hours a week. So it's just spreading out, and
Yeah.
having those extra sub hours will help.
Trying to recall the cost for that was $4,000.
Yeah, 38.75. Yeah, so I think it's a big gain for small amount.
I'm not, you being the first one, you get this question, maybe it's for Shirley, but I'm kind of surprised at only a 4% increase, given the health and everything, healthcare and salaries and benefits. Did somebody like shift? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, there was quite a longtime assistant director retired, and, you know, there were other shifts, so.
Right, okay.
That accounts for that, right, Shirley? Yeah.
I shouldn't have said anything and just said, well, look, the library could come in at 4%. What's wrong with everybody else?
Yeah, things go up and down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Did you have any new and exciting things that you really wanted to add and then Eric said no?
You know, we're a little bit kind of in limbo with the, you know, scoping study and looking at the future. So,
Right.
no, I really didn't this year. It
Yeah.
was a real focus on the thinking about the future of the facility.
Because we just added staff last year, right?
Yeah, we added, the assistant director position had been part-time and it went to full-time. So that was a big change for us, and it has really, really helped, just all around, you know, having that jump from part-time to full-time.
Great.
Other questions?
Jane has one capital item, the bookmobile.
And I don't know what page this is, Eric.
I'll
I
find
think
it.
it's the last page of the capital,
Last but not least, the bookmobile.
teeny tiny,
Yep, page
it is,
84.
okay.
84.
Okay, so the bookmobile has been in operation since 2016 with a predicted 12-year life. So we're looking at replacing it in FY '28. In previous years, we had been putting 8,700 in the capital fund towards a $90,000 replacement. After contacting 3 manufacturers this year, it was clear that wasn't going to be enough. The costs I got varied from $170,000 to replace with the current model to $250,000 for a Sprinter van, which is kind of the future of bookmobiles. So the request here is for $20,000 to be put aside with funding available in FY '28 of $136,000. The difference between those, there is some trade-in value for the current bookmobile, and fundraising efforts would make up the difference.
Are any of those options electric?
All 3 manufacturers I talked to said electric is not a great option at this point. It's obviously something we'll look at. It's more expensive. The problem is that with such a heavy load, static load all the time, you'd just be, and in the cold weather, you'd be constantly charging. Our outreach librarian went to a conference, the Association of Bookmobile and Outreach Services, and yes, there is such an organization, and it was wonderful. It was like shopping for, you know, they had the bookmobiles there, and they had, and she talked to a lot of colleagues from across the country, and obviously talked about electric. And the experience so far, and maybe it will improve, has been the electric vehicles are a challenge for this kind of use.
So we use it for outreach and I'm familiar with the summer, you know,
Right?
Dottie going around to the neighborhoods, but in the winter we use it for the homebound. Is that what you were saying?
In the winter, Sarah uses it to go to the preschools. And so she'll take the carts of books off the bookmobile and wheel them into the preschool. They don't actually get on it, you know, logistically it's, but it is operated year round. And the next generation Sprinter vans are a little bit easier to operate year round because it's easier to get the carts on and off.
Yeah. I guess I would just, this might be the kind of thing where you could get a grant for the electric part of it, like school buses. There's a lot of grants out there for because they're so much more expensive than regular school bus, but people will
Right.
pick up the difference for you sometimes. So since you got a couple years, maybe things will change, but
Yeah, I mean, we'll obviously look at everything. This was like a preliminary.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll definitely be looking at everything.
Other questions? Okay, well, thank you for your presentation and thank you for everything you do. I mean, the library is like the most popular person in school right now. So anyway, thanks.
Oh, thank you, Ted. Thank you.
thank you.
Someday they'll have an electric fire truck.
Police, Chief Foley.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning. I was running a little late and I was coming down one road, realized I was going a little over the speed limit. It says, maybe the police won't pull me over on the way to, but I slowed down anyway.
As long as you slow down, that's all right.
What's your license plate, Chief?
Where would you like me to start? On my capital, or do you want to go with the regular budget?
Regular budget?
Okay. We're starting on page 123 is basically what the department has for services, just an overview. Some we don't do right now because of manpower shortage, but once we get up to full strength and the addition, you will see us implementing pretty much everything on the sheet we have here. So it's quite a bit, you know, it's just the, you know, getting back out into the neighborhoods, neighborhood watch programs, you know, different type of trainings we want to do. Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of calls on internships. It's something that we really need to look at, you know, and try to set up a program that we can use that as a recruitment tool. So, you know, it's kind of hard to try to do everything when you're limited in pretty much 95 to 98% of your services are going for calls for services. So it's in the books. It's a plan. My report basically is pretty much, seems like it's Groundhog Day, you know, is that we're shorthanded and we try to recruit and we do recruit and then we're shorthanded and all that. And I think we've got a good program in place with sending the officers and my administrative assistants to a recruitment retention class that was put on down in Massachusetts. They picked up a lot of good ideas. I was at one yesterday, basically for chiefs and sheriffs, put on by VLCT through their legal counsel, understanding the rules and all that. So we now have 5 people that are actively trained in the new standards of recruitment and retention. So going forward with the study by Colonel Baker, I think we'd be able to, you know, pick up some good candidates and all that. I fielded a lot of questions from the chiefs yesterday about the study. And I always said that, you know, if you're interested in coming to Williston, watch the news and watch the newspapers and we'll see which way we're going to go. Basically, I'll highlight each section. The big, you know, shows everything on one page at 125, but we'll start on 126, which is our administration. And pretty much, you look at all the budgets, usually budgets are probably 80 to 85% personnel costs, and then the rest is day-to-day operations and incidental costs and all that. So the big bulk of my budget is my personnel costs. And in the administration includes myself, patrol commanders, which is be the lieutenants. There's only one in there right now. We'll wait and see what the board decides during this budget phase. There's not much large increase in this line, other than, like I said, the personnel costs. On the next page, the building maintenance. Pretty much, everything's pretty much close to it. We're trying to, and it's in our capital plan about, our building now will be 17 years old, almost 18 years old. We're finding that, things don't last a lifetime when it comes to construction. So we're finding, especially our HVA system needs to really be watched closely. So we've started it's part of the capital plan, but we've developed a good relationship with RIAC as pretty much our standard to come in and look at what's going on in the building, making recommendations for us. So when we need to make replacements, we believe we've got a good company doing the research for us on that. And when you walked around with us, you saw, how the building is designed. And basically, it's 4 sections in that building. So you get different, the heat's on high in one area, it's low in the other area, it's medium, all that. Same thing with the air conditioning and all that. So everybody, like today in here, turn the heat down and all that. So, but that's what we're watching and all that. We made a lot of changes in it, our system inside there, and with the growth. So it's going pretty good. Our communications department, if you're well aware of it, that we relocated our dispatch from here over to Essex. It's worked out very well. We do meet every so many months to, sit down, discuss how we're doing there. It's a really plus for everybody when you're able to have 2 dispatchers on. Our dispatchers are now cross-trained, because here, when they were in this building, they were just police. Now they're cross-trained over at Essex as police, fire, and EMS. So that's a plus for them to have additional dispatchers. We're currently down 1 dispatcher for our side. And so our 2 dispatchers are really, hustling. Ashley, my administrative assistant, fills in as much as she can. So I'm not going to talk a long time because she has to go home and get rest because she's working the night. So I told her I would talk fast and get her out of it. But we are advertising, and like I mentioned, we have the team we have is that does all our recruitment now, and we're assisted by Eric's assistant, Erin. So she's really working with us closely. We did the applications, the questionnaire, and all that. So she's helping us along as she gets the application in. She streamlines them and gives them to the team that does the interviews and all that. So hopefully within the next, next maybe 2 months, we'll have our 3rd full-time dispatcher in position over there. So, and it'll take a burden off everybody. And a lot with communications, if you look down at the bottom of 128, these are all our technical stuff, computer communication that goes around. So there's a lot of stuff in there, antivirus, email accounts. Valcor is our records management system. That is part of the state system that we go on. It doesn't cost us anything other than incidentals to keep it operational for licensees and all that.
Is that the system that Jim Baker was complaining about, saying it wasn't really any good?
Yes.
Do we have a proposal to upgrade that?
We're on the, unless we go on our own, and that creates a bigger problem.
The statewide system.
Yeah. Some there's 3 outside the state. There's 3 agencies that are not on the Valcor system, which is the spoken system that we were originally on. And there was a time when I first started that we were actually on 2 systems at the same time, Valcor and Spillman, and then we went to totally Spillman. It's a state-of-the-art system if it's built out correctly and you have all the trinkets on it, but free is free, so how can you say no to free?
Well, you can if you're talking about adding a dozen positions
Yeah.
and you're doing it on no data because you don't have any data that's usable.
Yeah.
So that's a problem when we do get to the point of adding a dozen more police officers. It would be really nice to be able to say, this is why,
Yeah.
as opposed to,
Well, that's why Colonel Baker recommended a dedicated analysis.
data, but still you get to have the good data in there, so.
Yeah, well, again, there's a way of figuring that out, so that's what that person would be doing, is looking at what was, dispatched as and what was The old system was you dispatch on one type of call, and then when you're done with that call, you verified whether or not it was the same call or is it a different call. So that's where you'd look at the correct data. That doesn't happen here unless the officer tells the dispatcher what it needs to be, coded as. So, again, there's a meeting coming up a week from Monday with the governor to talk about public safety. So I'm not sure where that's going to go, but there's a lot of people that's concerned about Valcour. So, we'll see what happens with that.
Okay.
I had a system down in Massachusetts that I could go in my office every morning and just print up and it'll tell me everything that happened in that last 24-hour period. And somebody if you called me up and says, Chief, we have, I want to know how many, radar operations you run on my street. I can tell you the date, time, how many people we stop, where from and all that. Same thing with, so it's just, we're limited to what we can do. And if we go on our own, the cost would be astronomical for our own CAD system. I know Hartford has their own regional dispatch down there. It's Hartford, Windsor, and Norwich. And they're on Spillman, but they're not on the main brand. There's like a smaller Spillman CAD system, so you don't get all the trinkets, but it still costs you a lot of money. So
What's Burlington on? Are they on Valcour?
they're on Valcour.
Because they seem to have a lot of data in that report they had. Maybe they just collected it for the report.
Well, they have a dedicated person that does that. Yeah,
So you think that the system may be capable if we had the personnel to
yeah.
babysit it?
Sergeant Shepard, who's a IT person and does all our data for the traffic stops. And he actually will go back into the system and look at every traffic ticket that we've written and every warning to make sure it's coded correctly before we send it to the state so they can have it for their data collection. But we're tying up a supervisor to do that.
Yep.
So. Investigative service, again, this is the plan to have a BCI. We've always had this, but we've never had it funded, so since I've been here, and that's kind of like.
Does it really exist if it's not funded?
Huh?
Does it really exist if it's not funded?
Well, again, it's there, and I every time I see it.
What?
It's authorized.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The biggest change is our Chittenden County Unit for Special Investigation, QC. That's been dropped almost $10,000. Again, it's personnel. Not everybody can put people in there, so there's limited people working in there. And that's one of the things that, when we put up people in BCI is that we would probably assign somebody to that unit. We don't get many those type of cases, but when you do, I believe it's a feel good that we have our own people doing these type of investigation because it's in our community. And it's that relationship, your own police department's doing, it takes time to dedicate that type of training, but, it's nice to have. It's nice to have.
So why is it so much smaller?
They've downsized big time at that unit, and I think a lot of agencies are not putting people in there, so this is basically, to offset some of their costs over the unit.
I know it used to be that the towns were assessed a percentage, a fee or whatever the term would be, based on the number of calls.
Calls, yeah.
And I thought that was not the case anymore.
No.
Which, yeah, because it's pretty unfair.
Yeah.
But, okay, that's interesting and concerning.
Yeah, I know the Burlington who runs the unit, they downsized their command staff that oversees that, so.
Interesting.
In the bottom of page 130, we talk about expenses. Eventually, that storage unit next to the garage outside will be gone, but we're not sure when it's going to get going. We're trying to figure that out. And the blood tests, basically, we still haven't got an answer on that, but that's basically for DUI drugs. We've seen a very large uptick in people driving under the influence of drugs. It's not the old days of marijuana. You'd be surprised what we find in the systems that deals with heroin, fentanyl, methamphetamine, cocaine, and it's amazing. And some people have probably 3 or 4 of them in the system when we deal so.
Why are there only 7 tests?
Because we believe some of the money, some of the tests are paid for through the grant. And we're just still trying to get an answer for it. So 7 has been the number we've had in there. So that could change next year where we actually know what, you know.
You do more than 7 DUIs a year, though.
No, it's not 7 DOIs. No.
Yeah.
We some weeks we average 7 in a week.
I was going to say, so this is
Yeah.
just like you might make a decision that you need to do a blood
Yeah.
test on.
Yeah, the vast majority of DUIs don't involve a blood test if there's
Right.
DUI alcohol. The vast
The alcohol, no, it's just is all drugs. This is all drugs. The next page, 131, is our patrol services. We currently are allocated for 15 patrol positions and 2 command positions, 2 administrative positions. We currently have 13 of those filled right now. And like I said during my presentation on Tuesday night, that we have 2 in the queue. 1 definitely is at the stage of interviewing with me and the town manager. And I've already spoken to her at the beginning of this week to tell her that with the holidays and our priority was getting Officer Dubois on board and get ready for the academy, that once we get that all taken care of after the first year, we'll invite her in and the town manager and I will interview her, do a one-on-one with her so we can decide if she should continue in the process. As you're well aware, we have a total of 10 units, patrol units, including our unmarked vehicles, our uniform, marked units, my unit, the unit for the lieutenant. And really the biggest cost, because when I'll talk about that in my capital plan on that, but by us rotating the units around between 2.5 and 3 years, we keep the mileage down, we keep the repairs down because it still falls under the warranty. And then when we auction them off, we get a good resale value on, so that keeps the cost down as much as possible. And really the biggest cost is the tires. And we're looking eventually that we're trying to get, where we don't have to change them twice a year, like put the summers on. We're doing some trials right now where it's an all-season tire to see how it operates in this type of weather and all that. So that would probably keep the cost, and would lower the cost. The fuel, it's a juggling act, because halfway through the year, we're looking at right now an estimate of 340, I think it's 349 on the pumps. But it could go as high as $4, it could go as low as $2 and change. So it's a flip of a coin and all that. The change in the and we have some money in the mileage there, but basically if we have a cruiser available, the officers will take the cruiser. The training, we've increased that because the training in the state is like pretty, other than what something's at the academy, there's no specialized training. So I've been sending everybody out of state. We're looking at, Massachusetts Chiefs of Police have their own training unit. It's called Municipal Police Institute, MPI. I send people to those because it's quality training and all that. If you have a specialty, like Officer Rick Reno, Sergeant Rick Reno, he's in school, master's program for peer support. I actually sent him last year this year to California to a peer support training. So I try to send people out. I think it serves 2 purposes. It gives them a different type of training. The network is incredible. And again, it builds morale by sending them, When I sent 4 of them down to Worcester for the recruitment and retention class. So we had discussion yesterday with with the director of the police academy. It's an ongoing, but there's a lot of transition going on at the academy right now with trying to get more people in there and all that. So I believe always that, you know, you can never have too much training, and so that's my plan is, and I've carried this in every agency I've been the chief in, is that you need to go out, you know, and go there. The state has mandatory training that we have to have. You know, we have 30 hours of mandatory in that it's firearms. So we do our own firearms here. We have firearms instructors. We have use of force every other year. We have domestic violence every other year. We have fair and impartial police, and those are all mandated through the academy. So they have their own instructors. But we have to come up with the additional hours to make 30 hours. And very seldom somebody just has 30 hours. They exceed that. So that's what we're doing.
I think there's a lot of value in having some training outside of the state walls, just to get a different experience, maybe a bigger town, you're with peers who are working in a bigger city. It's interesting for people, I would think, rather than just, it's a small enough state that if you go to the same training with the same
Yeah.
100 people all the time, it gets a little insular, so. I think
And that's how we found out about the Comfort Dog program.
Yeah,
You know, they were at Roger Williams University in a class, and, you know, and they were talking about it, and we came back and we presented, and now we have Duke. So,
there you go, proof.
yeah. The next page is basically our programs. The community outreach is our outreach personnel that we share with the surrounding towns through Howard Center. As you know, in the study, we're looking at having our own dedicated person. Our kennel, again, it's nice that we have a good system here where, you know, checks and balances or licensing. So if we pick up a dog, and, you know, Facebook is wonders, Twitter is wonders, because we put the face of the animal on and we get calls, we know who owns it and all that. But we do have a place if we have to, if nobody claims a dog, it's Lucky Puppies over in Colchester, and I found out last week that they're closing. So Ashley has been tasked to figure out what other departments take their dogs, and, you know, and see what that costs. Hopefully, we can stay within this range of what it costs for the kennel fees and all that. And we have awards programs. We started this year where people with multiple years of experience, anniversaries here, we do a little something special. We just started that. We had it for Dispatcher Chamberlain and Sergeant Claffey. They reached milestones, so we did something special with sandwiches and all that. So we're going to continue that forward. Again, it's another morale. It gets everybody together. And then our public service programs. That's basically our Halloween stuff and our trinkets in the lobby and brochures if we want to send them out. But the Halloween program is a big hit, you know. So it's nice to have that in this community. And then the Community Justice Center is our CJC in our building. Like I talked about, is that we relocated them down on the first floor of our building, because that way they're not being chaperoned around the building. They don't have to be let in, let out. They don't have to be watched going to the, you know, so everything's worked out. It's a positive for the unit there. So it's I haven't heard anything negative about it.
What's the big jump for?
Basically what we do is we offset some of the costs that they don't get from DOC.
But it's not personnel, is it,
Man is being decreased.
okay,
And there's some personnel costs baked in with
Into the
COLA
grant.
merit.
We, as a town, pay all the benefits and things. That's not the state part, right? Like, the grant doesn't cover the benefits for the staff?
It essentially covers operations to a certain point, and then we fill in that gap.
Yeah.
So I think the total program budget is around 190 or so.
Yeah.
And the town puts in this budget for next year 62,000. And we estimate for the grant reporting about in-kind contributions based on building space and administrative time to, mainly Shirley's time and Chief's time, to oversee the grant. We value that in kind around another $40,000 or so. So kind of overall, the town's investment in the program about $100,000 in terms of operating budget and in kind. I have reached, I think I shared this the other night, I've reached out to Heinsberg and Richmond. They are primary users of the services as well, and their select boards are having a dialogue with my request, asking for a financial contribution towards the operating budget for the program. So they are discussing it, I know, as part of their processes right now as well.
Do we have I mean, obviously we don't want to put a deadline on them because we're asking them for money, and whenever it might come in, that would be a good thing. But do we have a sense of when they might, will it be within this budget process so that we could, factor that in?
Yep, I anticipate we'll know, as they finalize their warning for town meeting. What I did in my conversation with them, I put an extra $10,000 collectively from those two towns. It may be higher than that, but I try to take a conservative estimate, and we put that in our miscellaneous revenue line as part of that overall.
We see more and more of the community justice program, growing. What studies show on the effectiveness of this? There must be studies that have been done versus the alternative.
They have their programs. Crystal Lee has the successes she has and all that from her. And again, it's a good program. I sit on some of the circles and participate. It holds them accountable a lot different than the courts will hold people accountable. So, it's, as you notice in the paper, they're going to be able to work with people in domestic violence incidents and all that. So they're expanding their coverage area.
Part of what we're looking for in the future too, the idea of the co-location facility in Taft Corners area is to help that connectivity with the community and folks be served by the CJC that might have a tough time getting down to the village without access to a vehicle or public transportation. And, working to expand that community outreach unit concept to really have a good partnership on that outreach front as well. Continue to work within the police department.
The community justice program is putting more of the cost of rehabilitation onto the towns from the state. That an accurate assessment?
I think it's that local partnership. I think it's originally from a Department of Corrections grant. It's working to get people engaged in a system in a way that's restorative to help both the victims and the people who were involved in the infraction as well. It's a really good process. It's certainly a good alternative for different types of offenses out there, and it really keeps it at a local level. So it's certainly a model that's proven and a good program that we run here.
So it's a model that has been proven in other communities or in studies?
Well, it's been pretty much probably since 2012, 2013 here in the community. The former chief, Shepherd, Dodge, instituted that and agreed under Rick McGuire to start the program here. So, it's referral based on the officers' connection with the people they're dealing with. And there's certain cases that are referred to, them. Cases get referred by probation, cases get referred by the state's attorney's office. So it's a variety of places where these cases can come from.
Public safety is just something I hear about from a lot of people in the community. Really concerned as the town grows with more businesses, needing more police action. Public safety is something that's really important to the members of the community of Williston.
To your question, I know that I was on the Community Justice Board for 7 years. There are many national and international studies about the efficacy of community justice and the reduction of recidivism amongst participants who go through that process. But it's also a victim-centered approach. And so, folks who have been caused harm, it's really focused on repairing that harm to them. And so instilling a sense of community and So again, really the benefits and the efficacy of it have been proven in many studies. I'm sure Chief doesn't have them offhand, but if you ask Krista Lee,
Yeah.
if you talk to her, she can, give you, I'm sure, hundreds of them.
I think one of the other values is for juveniles who just have a silly misstep, by going through the CJC restorative justice process, they could never have a record of something silly that stays with them, right? They go instead.
I see the importance of that on juveniles. I just but don't understand about all the retail theft we see and, domestic violence, if that's increasing. I hope that it improves upon that also.
I will say, a lot of the cases too are referred, or at least historically have been referred as part of potential like parole situations. So there is, there are times when this is a condition of parole or probation, that they go through the community justice process. So they may have also gone through the court systems and still be going through the community justice process, again, to prevent recidivism, so that then they build stronger connections to the community, because when they have stronger connections to the community, they are less likely to cause harm within the community.
Thank you.
Is there any, I don't want to start a feud with other towns, but is there any, Richmond and Heinsberg are in our catchment area, and we have to take their cases?
Yep.
Even if they don't pay any money?
Yep. That's the way it's been set up since the beginning.
That's part of the grant part, right?
Yeah. So I think I've had good conversations with both managers of those communities, and that they understand they're getting a good service that they haven't paid for.
Yeah.
And,
Maybe we could do an in-kind trade or something. I don't know what that would be, but send them some of our sewage or something. I don't know.
Wastewater.
Wastewater. I'm sorry.
Yeah, wastewater.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah, because that just,
Might have a dog kennel.
that is a bit unfair.
One thing I was talking about with them is, a methodology for allocation. And part of this is you can look back at cases referred from those communities, but the CHC also offers other services, for example, mediation services and things of that nature that aren't necessarily a panel based. So I think what I pitched to them was a population based on the town's contribution, the 62,000, and also the in-kind number, and to see what they came back with. And they said we could have an evolving conversation looking at data points, but I told them basically, if your communities are going to support some allocation to start, that's a good first step. We can refine this.
Sure. Actually, my 2 cents, I've seen as a lawyer that it does work a lot, but no system works perfectly. The friction in the system right now is repeat offenders and people who are shoplifting because they're feeding a substance abuse disorder, and I don't know that the restorative process by itself works for them entirely, but that's not that's a separate issue from anything the town can control. So I think it's a great program that needs to be supported. The other issues are things that we're gonna have to work on as we go forward.
And finally, on my last page, our revenues. What we've done is trying to move our patrol out of the building more. Ashley has been certified to do fingerprinting now and VIN verification, so we're not bringing an officer in. So hopefully we'll be able to do fingerprinting more, and that's a good source of our revenue. And evident on court fines, it's a flip of a coin when that's decided, or when we get the money. We never know. We don't get any highlights or any heads up that you're getting money. Surely you'll tell us that we got some money, or we'll get something. So basically the money that we believe is pretty much is the fingerprinting, insurance reports, the VIN verification. It's amazing how many videos that we have to duplicate for the court system and all that. So it's a time-consuming effort. So to have an officer tied up to do that, Ashley has stepped up, just like what the state police have done. They've removed a lot of their, uniform people out of administrative position and backfill them with civilians to get people out. So that's keeping our officers out in the field without coming back in doing this stuff. So it's worked out well so far. That's it on the,
Chief, on the tickets,
Yeah.
court fines, is that what you were,
yeah,
okay. And just, the number goes from FY '24 of $2,000 up to $13,000 in FY '25.
yeah.
24 is the only through September
Yeah,
30th.
first quarter.
And if you look at the actual in 23, it's almost 16,000.
Okay, I'm sorry, yep, got it.
Again, it's wherever they get around to sending the money.
It's good to be king.
Yeah.
Are we gonna talk about new positions now or later, or?
Yeah, I could mention that now if the board would like.
Yep.
So on page 7 of my transmittal, this is based on the Baker report and thinking about looking to build out the personnel in our police department and things like that future framework. Jim's recommendation of where to start in this was to think about that second police lieutenant position to build out the community outreach unit and for a police detective position. And that would be achieved by most likely having a current officer put into that BCI role, detective role. Then we would backfill that position with another patrol position. So the operating cost numbers are inclusive of all the benefits costs as well for these positions. What we broke out on page 7 was thinking about the cost in terms of on a tax levy, but that's more of the revenue side of things. But just in terms of the operational and the expense side of things, that's where those numbers lie, and that's the suggestion to consider here should the board want to add police personnel in FY25 of where to start based on Jim Baker's analysis.
I don't know if we want to talk about now or January. I'd like a little more information on the police detective position. I understand the lieutenant one, I think, but what does that buy the town?
It's in terms of what the position does.
What it does that we're not doing today?
Sure. Chief, do you want to?
Basically, they do all the follow-up work. They do major investigations. Right now, each officer does their own follow-up work. And if today's the last day of the shift, they don't come back until Thursday of next week and they have cases to follow up. They just sit there. So, and, do drug investigations dedicated, because you just don't do a drug in one day. It takes time. Do search, they all do their own search warrants and all that. So this is more of an added position to do follow-up work. And so people are not waiting around, they'll call tomorrow looking for an officer and they won't come back. So there's no way of following that up. Mm-hmm. And it's necessary to assist us in going to court, meeting with people down in court, working with other agencies, other detectives on cases, intelligence, and things like that.
So more likely to actually build a case against somebody, but also keeps patrol officers on patrol as opposed to doing
Well, the officers will still do their work, but if they know they're going on vacation and they need some work done, who's going to do it? Mm-hmm. If you task another officer on your shift, then what happens to that officers? Mm-hmm. If we have a major case, a death or something like that, we need continuity. We need, we can't have people waiting to, get a call back in 2 days, 3 days, a week, and all that.
Why not? I'm just.
I'm just saying, it doesn't pay off. If you're a victim of a crime and you're told you gotta wait till the officer comes back and you have some serious questions, at least a detective will be able to pick that up and sit down with you or do follow-up for you. If you have all information, if we need to get statements from people, we gotta do a different type of investigations. It's just a part of doing business in law enforcement, that you need somebody that knows to meet with our other partners, the feds, the state, so it's hand in hand. And we see it every day where I'm getting calls or dispatchers getting calls and want to talk with the officer and are told that they won't be back for a week or they won't be back until, there's nobody picking up their cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not challenging the decision. I'm just trying to figure out in my own head how I would articulate. This would be one of our biggest ads. And so I'm just trying to articulate it. And I might need to follow up to get a little bit more, because, just to say, well, when the victim calls back, someone will be there to answer isn't quite enough for, $120,000. But if it's more likely to result in a conviction, or it's more likely to keep patrol officers patrolling, that would be something I think I could wrap my head around. But you don't need to answer right now if you want to think.
Well, no, there's a lot that I don't want to say in public of what they would do, but there's certain investigations that need to be done in this community that we're not doing. And I'll just put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah, but Chief, in terms of patrol officers being freed up, I mean, it's not that the patrol officers would actually be the primary person responsible for a case if it's something that needs further investigation. Am I right about
Right,
that?
right.
In terms of getting a search warrant, the patrol officer may be a significant part of an affidavit of probable cause, but he's not going to be the driving force who's going to have to take time off, go to Costello Courthouse, wait for a judge. That's going to be something, he might have to do that, he or she, but the detective is going to be the primarily responsible for that, and that would free up the patrol officers.
Right, and the other thing is like, yeah, everybody's pretty much a death investigation, not everybody in the department, but if you have, we had the incident where we located the skeletons.
Yeah.
And we had to bring people off duty to assist on that. A detective would be able to, we had to reach out to the state police, they had detectives. They come over because certain things that needed to be done to look at. You need to make phone calls, you're on the phone with different states looking to try to identify that this person. If you only have 2 officers on duty and somebody's tied up on that, you only have 1 officer. Prime example was yesterday was they made 2 arrests within 10 seconds. And for 45 minutes, we did not have an officer in town. They were both at the courthouse. A detective would be able to take those both down to the courthouse and wait with them and keep the patrol units on the street.
There you go. So more patrol officers on the street. That's what I wanted to hear.
I've been watching a lot of MeTV. I think that's important. It's important that I state that for what I'm going to say next. It's the difference between Dragnet and Adam 12.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, you're just, but I said it's on TV now. That's why I'm not dating myself. That is available now.
No, you are. You totally are.
You got to watch Blue Blood. That's
So this may be asking you to choose your favorite child, but I know that Baker's report said the lieutenant was the priority if we're going to hire like one position. Is that what would have the biggest impact on public safety in our town? Is that what would have the biggest impact on your department's operations? So if you had to choose one that we funded for this year, would it be lieutenant or would it be
the
detective?
thing is that we have a vacant lieutenant's position right now that we need to fill first. So that's a priority. And if we want to build this out, and like Jim said, and we've seen what happened before, that you have a study and you dwell on it and you don't take any actions on it. My recommendation would be to add a civilian position also, not just 2, uniform positions, but, Jim talks about the data analysis, and, you want the data, and when are we going to stick that person in? That's a civilian position, and that would help drive this. We're looking at a storefront already at Maple Tree Place, and it'd be nice to have it, but if you have nobody to be in there, it's a problem. But I think, I think the lieutenant, to build out that side, because now we've divided the department into a patrol unit and an administrative unit. And there's certain criteria for both to do things. But I think we need to take the step forward and go with that. But I would like to have 3 positions rather than 2.
Right. So, but if we had to, I'm not saying, one way or the other, but if we had to do just one, would it be the lieutenant or the detective?
I would go with the detective.
Okay.
Yeah, and there are other things to think about too. We could potentially start one position halfway through the fiscal year or something like that too, with building out that unit. Certainly options for the board to think about. And one thing on the data side, I've put in for a grant application from the Leahy Center for Rural Partnerships, looking to have a graduate level intern perhaps be with us next fall to do some data analysis work across the town to kind of pilot that data analyst role We'll see if that gets funded or not, but that's one thought as a strategy to look at having someone in that role and what that role would do for both our public safety agencies and probably assisting our planning office as well. Gives us a chance to pilot with a person who has some skills to see if that's how we would structure a position in the future.
I think we talked about it the other night too, is applying for a COPS grant, which is
Yep.
multi-year, it's not 100%, but it allows you at least to graduate your tax rate more slowly with, after these positions are, after a new position is authorized.
One on the detective, it sounds like it might be helpful. We have a job description that probably needs some cleaning up anyway. So we could do some work to share that with the board if it would be helpful in January to give you a good scope of the position to help you have those points if residents are asking about what would this person do day to day.
I think there's a lot, to Mike's point, there's a lot of support right now for increased public safety resources. But people want things that are going to make a difference to them on the ground, not otherwise, not overhead. So we just have to make sure that we could translate anything we add into a greater presence or more effective policing.
And we also have job descriptions for the BCI position too. So
The what? I'm sorry.
the detective position. That's the old me. Now it's BCI, so and all that.
Great. It's an exciting time.
You want me to walk through the capital? Does anybody have questions on it that we want to just highlight that?
Further questions by the board before we go to capital?
Has the Essex Police Department found any value with their Citizens Police Academy that they've started last fall?
I haven't talked to Chief Hogue at all on that, but I did have them in Massachusetts, and they were a hit. People like, but what I see is that you run one of them, and then when you try to get the second one done, nobody shows up. So, yeah, the thing is that you need people to do it, and you got to do it where you can make sure you can make it work. But if it's done correctly, it's a good positive piece to the relationship between the citizens of the town and the police department.
I had a friend went through it, and she she had so much fun. She thought it was a great program.
Yeah. And that was big, a long time ago. Some departments still keep going, but we're limited to people that, we can teach it and who wants to teach it, who wants to be involved. So that'll be tasked to probably the new lieutenant, the administrative lieutenant, come up with a program and take the lead on that.
Just seems like really positive reinforcement of our police force.
Same thing with our neighborhood watch program. When I came here, we got signs, people asked to be represented, and then people started leaving, and people who ran the program weren't here, or, so priorities right now is keeping officers on the road to answer calls.
No, we value what you do.
Thank you. On the new pages will be 23 on the Capitol. That's the first one, then we jump up to 54.
All right, I'm confused. My capital only goes to page 8 or something.
This is a new Capitol. And I mentioned
Is that
the,
way in the back?
Yeah, the green highlighted.
Ah,
Everything.
there it is.
New this year, we used to have 2 binders.
Yeah.
Ah,
1 binder.
okay, my green tab only has 12 pages.
Look under
Now I have buildings.
buildings. Yep.
Yeah, it's all capital. It's
Okay.
different sections within the capital.
Roads,
Yep.
equipment, water, sewer,
one says-
It's
stormwater.
under buildings. It's under
Okay.
buildings.
All right,
you got it?
yep, but now we're on this page now. Okay, 15 you said, right?
23.
23. Oh, I have page 23, okay.
Got it? Basically, this is what I talked in my regular budget. It's the building capital, trying to plan for replacement of our AC unit, the furnaces, and the roof. So we wanted to make sure that when it needs to be replaced, that we have funds in there to replace them. And we just started this current year to build it out, because we figured, like I said, things don't last a lifetime anymore, and those units are at least 17 years old, so.
I don't remember having to replace any buildings during Dragnet.
Yeah. They just didn't put that on TV.
Why not? That's the most exciting.
Now we move forward up to page 54. The first thing on there is our cruiser replacement program. Like I mentioned earlier, that, you know, we try to rotate the cruisers between keep them 2.5 to 3. This last round, we're going 3 because we didn't buy. We used some of the money in this to offset the changes. Okay, all right.
As
Well-
needed. We have some analysis to do this year. What they're talking about is the MOU with the union last spring. There's going to be a variance in personnel costs, and one thought is seeing, do we need to defer some of these purchases to use that capital transfer to cover that added personnel costs? We've had open positions, so they may be able to be picked up through that. So we're gonna true it up as we get into the new calendar year to see where that lands, to make sure we have the funding for operations this fiscal year.
So cost-wise, cruisers went up about 20%. And it's just a very waiting game to when we'll be able to get cruisers. You know, we have to order them by a certain date. Replacement, we try to get at least 1 to 2 cycles of the equipment inside the vehicle to last, and then replace them again. It's amazing what we carry in these cruisers now. But the good thing is that we get a good return on our auctions and usually it's around $10,000. So it's a good offset there. So we're going to stay with the Tahoes. The reason why it's a larger vehicle for everybody. It handles all the equipment in it. You know, with our weapons, we have printers in there. We have mobile data terminals. So again, it's you're not crowded in it like it used to be. So you know, it's one of those things. The other thing is that with adding personnel down the road is that we need to start looking at how many we start. You know, because not everybody drives a vehicle the same way. So if you run 2 people, 3 people in a cruiser, they all drive it a different way. The seat sits one way, you know, so. But
Actually, I was going to ask how you'd settle on 6 + 4, 10 vehicles.
that's something we just added over the years on people. We try to have a minimum of 2 people. It's like my cruiser, it's only me, the lieutenant's only lieutenant. The comfort dog is just the dog and the handler because nobody else wants to get in it. And then the BCI cruiser. So those are the 4 unmarked.
Okay.
So with BCI, depending how many people we put in the BCI unit, it could be 2 people down the road where they share a cruiser and all that. And then it's usually 2 officers per cruiser that share. So it's worked out good that way.
Okay.
On page 55, it's our traffic safety unit. And the small little paragraph at the end of the narrative, if you look outside, there's a brand new blue trailer out there. It's our traffic safety unit. It's amazing the equipment we can put in there. We're actually going to put solar panels on it so it stays charged if we're on an operation. That cost the town nothing. It was a grant through Governor's Highway Safety. So when we do the DUI enforcement or traffic enforcement we set up in town, we have all these signs in there that allows us to notify people and all that. So And if they can't see that on the side of the road, I don't know what's wrong with them. Currently we have three trailers, that we put out through the community. That's how we gauge traffic in those communities. We also have a covert one that we can stick in neighborhoods that people, and you won't even know what it is. And it gives me an accurate count and speed. Because people see that little trailer out there and it's flashing signs and they slow right down. Well, with the covert, it doesn't do that. There's no flashing lights.
So Jean, be careful.
I tell you, there was one on Old Stage. That's what made me like, oh, I'm going a little faster than I should be.
The next page at 56, this is our technology unit. And tells you what we're planning to replace over the next few years. We've done a lot. We've added cameras in our building, the town hall, the fire department now, that we can monitor at dispatch. So that's a plus for the community. We wish the state AOT would put cameras in the busiest intersections in town to allow us to see things, like when there's a crash, we can see, but that's not gonna happen. So we have 3 out of the top 5 intersections that are the busiest in Chet County.
That's okay. Most people think the little thing that looks like a camera is a camera, when it's really just the emergency vehicle thing,
Yeah.
right? It's okay, don't tell anybody.
The next page, 57, is our firearms replacement. We did that 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. No complaints from the staff on it. So usually we get, at least 7 to 9 years, but as we keep them, clean, and those that have minor problems, replace them. It's worked out good. I'm going to skip.
Body
50
cameras?
Huh?
I assume we have body cameras. Is that in?
Yeah, that's the next one, but I'm going to hold off on that one. So let's jump to 59 first. 59 is our communication tower. If you turn from 2A, St. George Road, onto Oak Creamery Road, look to your right, like maybe not even 100 feet up, there's a little storage area. It's gated off with rope and all that. That's our tower. And we're working to put it up a little higher to enhance our communication here in town. So that's a work in progress through the town manager's office and Sergeant Shepherd and the communication people.
Yeah, the town entered into a 40-year lease agreement with Vermont Electric Co-op, who owns the property, with renewable terms at 10-year increments after that last year. What we're looking at, this is in your ARPA proposals to consider, is $50,000 for professional services for permitting through the Public Utilities Commission. This would be a 199-foot tower. You might recall I've shared, this is the one spot we can put it that is not in the flight path.
Yes.
The highest point. So it's a critical piece of public infrastructure for the town to implement here.
And then the last piece, if you turn the page back to 58, it's our request to implement body-worn cameras and less lethal devices. We're pretty much the only agency, I think, here in Vermont that doesn't have body-worn cameras. We have in-car videos, cruiser cameras, but we don't wear body-worn cameras. So eventually the state's going to come around and mandate it, that everybody has it. So we want to get ahead before we're mandated and allow us to look. We're looking at grants, everything out there. We had it in my agency down in Mass, but it was a while before we went to it. I have to look at everything to make sure I feel good about it. But we had a system down there that worked very well. It's a very good deterrent out there when people see it. The in-car cruiser videos we have currently right now, it does well. When we make a motor vehicle stop, the lights come on, it comes on. we'll go into a call for services and all that, but this will give us more capabilities of doing that. So by allowing us to begin the process, I think it's a officer safety issue for them and a protection to the citizens of Williston.
The structure for these is a 5-year lease arrangement, and we like this model to propose because the data storage is quite robust for these, and also to cover things if there's replacements or repairs that need to occur. This lease, it's $30,000 a year for 5 years. You can replace the equipment at the end of that. So the suggestion, this is a new piece of equipment. It's certainly take Chief's recommendation for, we're an only agency that doesn't have body worn cameras. They're beneficial for the officer's safety and for people engaged with the officer to have that data information. So in funding this, my initial suggestion was using ARPA for the first year. We would then need to find other funding in the following years, but and it's certainly a starting point for the conversation. But the lease model seemed to be the best recommendation here, as opposed to buying the equipment outright and having to come up with that data storage and any liability if things got broken or needed replacement.
Well, just managing that would be a nightmare, so it makes sense.
Yeah, and the big hurdle, and we're trying to figure this out, when I went to ICP this year, International Chiefs Conference, I met with a lot of the vendors, and, the biggest thing is when you have to go in there and redact,
Oh, right.
and some people, like Burlington has a full-time person that does it.
Sure.
Redact. You have some companies that have software for that, so we're seeing what is the best capability. Some agencies use the cloud, and I'm skeptical about the cloud and all that, So again, and with this type of, lease, is that they're changing yearly.
Right.
The dynamics of less lethal. So it'd be nice after 5 years, you rotate everything and get a new set of equipment and all that.
So the tasers and the cameras are all part of the lease, same lease?
Yeah. Yeah. And some like, it's Axon, that's the big company out there. Their in-car video and tasers network. So, yeah, so this tasers, some tasers will have videos on that. So it's good to maybe have one company that you're dealing with all the time. So you don't, like Motorola, we looked at Motorola, and that's a good one because they have software for redaction. But again, it's not something we're going to just jump in and say, okay, I want to talk to people who have both and find out what your pluses are, what your minuses are, where you see in the bump in the road is, and all that. And then before we actually sign on the dotted line, then we know this. So, if this is the okay, then I will task staff to start researching and do testing.
So is this 30,000, so it is or is not in the budget, the budget that?
It is in the budget.
That
Yep.
you transmitted? Okay.
Yep, it's part of the capital with ARPA as the funding.
And obviously with so much equipment and things, there's a lead time, I'm assuming, because this is a leased thing that, if we approve this and, for the FY25 budget, that you could get them pretty much right away once.
Yeah. If we go to a certain company, most of them have them in stock because the demand's on them now.
Yeah.
We're not the only state, or PD that's never had them. There's quite a few agencies out there that haven't gone that way, but once we know, same thing with the grant, we have to wait until March after town meeting, after the vote.
Right.
Then we can say, okay, we'll contact the cop's office to get the grant paperwork going and all that, but you have to wait till it's been approved by, even though the board might pass it and say, okay, we approve this, they want to make sure the vote has approved it.
Of course. Yeah.
So. And that's it from the police department. Sorry, I went over my time.
We started you late too. Any questions for the chief on either capital or operating? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, chief.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
with
you all
everything,
for
thank you
coming.
for what you do.
Thanks, everyone.
Chief Colette, looks like you've got a presentation. Cool.
Ooh,
Movie time.
Do you want to drive, Chief, or want me to drive?
If you have the PDF from yesterday,
Yeah, I can pull
if
it
you
up.
just want to share the PDF, that works for me.
That's it.
I apologize, Ted. It wasn't supposed to take this
No,
long to start my computer.
Don't worry about it.
They're going with the room temperature. You want me to turn it up at all? Or
Folks.
I'm good.
I had a jury trial once where I was going to play a piece of audio that the jury had already heard in my closing argument. And I said, but this is what it sounded like in this moment. Click, and nothing happened. Well, you can all remember what it sounded like. So, same effect. Let's move on.
Don't tell us what happened.
I won. Well, let me ask, while this is going on, does anybody need to take a 5-minute break? Nope. Okay. Are you
All right.
set?
Well, I wanted to start this morning, and unfortunately Shirley stepped out, but I wanted to thank Shirley for her work and Eric for his work on this. It really is a team approach as we navigate this, as you likely know. But Shirley is the rock, really, when it comes to helping put some of these numbers together. So I thought I would start out this morning. I have done this historically for Gene and Mike. I like this visual presentation. It just brings a little bit more to it, hopefully give you an idea about where we're coming from. Your fire department, Eric, if I could have the next slide, please, is built of 25 career staff. At full staffing, we have 7 career personnel assigned to our 24-hour shifts, and we run that down to a minimum staffing of 5 people on shift. So that means that we could have a person out sick or a person on vacation and not have to hire back on overtime. That allows us to have 3 people that staff the engine company and 2 which work on the ambulance. The captain, who is our training officer, works Monday through Friday, 8 in the morning until 4-ish in the afternoon. He also rides on the fire trucks and helps augment the other staff. So Monday through Friday, we could have, if at full staffing, potentially at 8 folks that would be on the apparatus. That has not been the case recently. And unfortunately, we've seen now, we have 3 vacancies in our career firefighter spots. We lost a member to PD, and the other 2 people are moving on for economic reasons, looking at their career where they had opportunities for more funds, more income. In addition to the career staff that worked shifts, myself, my deputy, Tim Gary, and our administrative assistant, Christy Morrison, work Monday through Friday as well. Tim and myself are both also cross-trained in EMS. And when staffing is at a minimum of 5 and we run concurrent calls, Tim and I will often be part of that response, including EMS. We have 14 call staff members. I'll speak a little bit more to that in a moment, but of those 14, 5 have EMS certifications. 9 of those 14 serve as firefighter only, and 7 of those folks are in their initial training. So it's not like they came to us and we're training them. And today is actually their live fire training exercise at the State Fire Academy. It's my intent, if I can get out of here at a reasonable time, to get down there and watch them finish up their live fire exercises down at the academy today. Only 2 of our call staff are trained to the level of driving our fire apparatus. Those are our incumbent folks, Lieutenant Whitmore and firefighter Short Sleeves. Next slide, please. We provide our primary response is advanced life support EMS. We staff that primary ambulance 24/7, 365 for you. We augment that with the engine company. So when the ambulance transports, if you remember, before we hired the extra 9 staff, that would only leave a single firefighter protecting the entire community, and that firefighter would be alone on the engine. It's a risk that we're not really willing to take any longer with the potential that exists in the community. We run a 2-tiered approach so that the engine goes to help augment the ambulance on our medical calls. That provides extra hands for lifting, that helps reduce our injury rate for back injuries and such, helps navigate that call and give a second set of eyes, especially in the changing climate that we're seeing, as you referenced earlier, Mike, about public safety and some of these unsettling scenes. It's good to have an officer who supervises that scene and keep their eyes kind of on a head on a swivel approach to make sure that our staff doesn't get into a bad situation. We, of course, do fire suppression. We also do technical rescue, including extrication, advanced auto extrication, rope rescue at the operations level, which means that we'll go to a certain grade, but we won't necessarily do a pickoff from height in a vertical setting, and ice and water rescue. We do a number of hazardous materials responses at the operations level, meaning we can mitigate small spills, but outside of that, we rely on the state hazardous materials team. We respond to a number of the motor vehicle crashes across the community. We also work on our community risk reduction programs, which are fall prevention, CPR to the public and other businesses in the community, and delivering Stop the Bleed programs, primarily through the schools. Ongoing vehicle and equipment maintenance, and we perform our own station maintenance with the exception of mowing the lawn at the fire station. I spoke a little bit earlier about recruiting and the call staff. If you can go to the next slide, Eric. We work to get our name out in the community and beyond the borders of our community. Our recruitment efforts, we participate in the Vermont's largest career fair that you may have seen advertised at the Champlain Valley Exposition. We've done that now for 2 years in a row. We work in collaboration with the Vermont Division of Fire Safety to help staff that. They give us our booth. We actually didn't need to pay for our booth. They covered the cost of that booth for us to be out there and working in concert with them. We're trying to get people in the door through that. A number of our staff that originate as call staff employees later become career staff employees. So that's a vehicle for us. So we'll focus on that. You can have the next slide. Statewide, we helped organize a recruitment drive this year of what we dubbed Operation Mayday. You likely saw the advertisements on WCAX television. We worked with Gray Media. We got funding from the state. We got an emergency preparedness grant, an EMPG grant, to help fund this for the entire state. And where that was a statewide fire department open house where we looked to recruit folks. Williston Fire Department had the most successful turnout of any fire department in the state. Anecdotally, given the limitations in data, we had over 15 people participate in that. And what we did was skill stations where they would participate in all the skill stations they came through. They signed a waiver. We took them through each skill station like you see here on the screen. At the end, if they completed it all, we gave them a gift card to Dunkin' Donuts. So we saw an increase in that. We saw a number of applications that would allow us to bring up that call staff number to where I presented it. Unfortunately, within the last just over 12 months and with 2 pending, we're going to lose 3 of those recruits to career fire departments other than our own, that they're going to get hired out of there. I don't mind seeing that. If we're the vehicle, I would have much rather kept them home here in our own department, but I understand that business is business sometimes. Next slide, please, Eric. Just a brief look at our data. If you're looking back here from 21, 22, and 23, ending on December 1, it shows cumulative data on the right-hand side of the screen as you face it. So we're on track to clear 2,340 incident responses this year, which will be the busiest year in the department history. We did a update of the way we record incidents on my arrival. Previous administration would record burn permits and other calls for service as an incident response, and I didn't feel like that was an incident. We moved to a computer-based burn permit scheduler. Now it's done all online, and so those are no longer incidents for us. So this represents actual vehicles out the door responses for us.
But fire incidents aren't all fires, right? They could be a
So their fire
car
incidents,
crash or...
yeah, so we use a National Fire Incident Reporting System, NIFRS recording. So this is anything that's not a 300 code. So there's 9 categories of incident responses. The EMS incidents are captured in anything in the 300 realm. So that would be primarily rendering aid to a person. Any fire incident would involve a hazardous material spill, a vehicle extrication,
Fire alarm response?
fire alarm response, correct, yeah. So that, it was just cleaner for me than breaking it all out. You see that when we do like an end of year summary, we'll break it all out by.
Well, and it's on the
code.
quarterly report, the number of
Yeah.
actual fires was a pretty small number, but there was a lot of fire.
Exactly.
And what if you have to roll the fire truck and the EMS? Is that, does it show up in both?
No, it does not. It's not. So if fire incidents are the incidents at the end of the incident. So unlike when you heard Chief Foley earlier about the dispatch to, our fire RMS has the ability to say the situation found. So the end result here is you're seeing the situation found. So if it was anything related, fire related, where the suppression units were the primary response and it was dealing with that type of response, it is fire. If it does not separate. EMS was when we went and rendered care.
Got it. Thanks. Good.
Next slide, please. Looking back at some of the data, we pulled EMS incidents only, so the NIFRS 300 codes since 2020, that's 31.5% in the last 4 years, essentially, through December 1. And that number is obviously headed north as we get the last 30 days here recorded on that graph. So that's quite a jump in our EMS service demand. I will say that it's not unique to our organization. You're seeing that in the greater Chittenden County area amongst EMS agencies.
A lot of that, I'm sorry, is a lot of that due to overdoses?
Not necessarily. No, I could break it out for you if you wanted to see. Actually, you do see it in the quarterly report, so where it says where we break it out of alcohol or drugs, but it is not necessarily that, no.
Part of an aging population?
Yes, sir.
I didn't want to say that, Mike, but yeah.
It really is. I don't have the numbers, but I know within a year of my arrival, when I looked at our 20% of our call volume was out of 1 of 5 senior housing responses. So 20% of our calls were having some relationship to rendering care to the aging population.
I resemble that remark.
So do we all at some point. The slide before you is the concurrent call percentage, and what this captures is that any time that we're already on a call, this is the percentage that a second call will come in when units are already committed. I can't explain the anomaly of 2021, other than it was a busy year in some aspects, but we stay right around that 21% mark. So about a fifth of the time, when we're on a call, another call comes in. And where that comes in, it plays an important role, is our ability to staff a second unit. If the units are already committed, we need somebody to answer that second call. We can do that when our staffing exceeds 5 persons. So if we have the 6th person, or when the deputy or myself or the captain are there during the weekday responses, you will see us come out and staff either a second engine, the ladder truck, or the reserve ambulance. When we're above 5 personnel, we staff the ladder truck. But if a second medical comes in, they abandon the ladder truck and take the second ambulance. And we've been able to do that more frequently when we're above that 5-person minimum staffing. If you could go to the next slide, Eric. I tried to look at, right now, we don't have a filter within our RMS to allow us to break out the number of responses that the backup ambulance, the unstaffed ambulance, if you will, how many times that goes out the door. So this is raw data from actual numbers for that ambulance. You'll see that high number in November, that's because the primary ambulance was out, so that second ambulance was actually in service as the primary ambulance, so that's why I put the asterisk there. But those other calls, with the majority of those other calls that you see through July of this year, would have been answered by mutual aid ambulance agencies, either Essex, Richmond, or South Burlington. And so when staffing has allowed, when we're at full staffing, we can put that ambulance on the road that many more times.
Chief, that makes a big difference in time for response, right? If it's not coming from another community.
It makes a huge difference in that, especially for critically ill patients. And we've had a number of them recently where our staff really recognize the importance of being able to have no delay in getting that ambulance to the scene. Right? Think about if your loved one was waiting because you were caught in one of those 20% concurrent calls and you're waiting for that outside ambulance to come from a mutual aid agency. We'll initiate care, but you won't be able to transport that patient until that second ambulance gets there.
Is mutual aid, is there any money exchange in that, or is that just, we're all in this together?
The only time that there's money exchanged in mutual aid is we could, of course, bill. So when we transport when our ambulance goes to another community, we bill as if it was our call. Mm-hmm. We also will bill on paramedic intercepts. So if we provide a paramedic level service to an outside agency that requests it, we bill that agency. Okay.
There's a matrix within our area of different ambulance priorities to go to calls. They go down the list of who's available.
Ambulance is still pretty much covered by insurance, though, isn't it? Ambulance transport. I know it's different than calling. I guess, how does that work?
Not necessarily.
No?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
We can get into that a little bit further down here when we look at revenue. We'll talk about that then. The next slide, Eric. So I just try to highlight some key items here with the operating budget. And this is the high overhead. We'll break this out individually on each slide, but salaries, equipment maintenance, IT, dispatch and records management, and then training. Next slide. The large driver of the budget increase before you is reflective on the anticipated salary. As you folks know, we're in active negotiations on our contract with the firefighters union. And so this number reflects what our supposed liability might look like. Next slide. Equipment maintenance and repairs. So the advantage of having extra staff on is that we get to operate more equipment. The ladder truck, when Jeff was here, Jeff always asked us, we bought $1 million ladder truck, who drives it? And in 2020, we didn't have a person to drive that ladder truck. So when we added the additional staff in 21, that allows us to get that ladder truck on the road. but that all comes at a cost, right? More fuel costs, more cost for training. I would say that we are out and active in the community with our vehicles, and that's part of increasing service delivery is maintaining that equipment. We've seen a bit of a jump. We have an aging engine that we continue to see a little bit of a heartache with some emissions control. So much so that we've actually built that into this year's budget, because we can predict that that truck's going to cost us between $5,000 and $10,000 because of the emissions control system. A lot of the things like you heard the chief talk about, it's lube oil filter, it's preventative maintenance. The actual swapping tires, that's a big cost for us. And the chief drives small vehicles.
I was gonna say.
When you start putting, when you start having trucks that have 10 tires on them and having to switch those out, it's a little bit pricier than that. One of the things that I'm not sure that you're aware of, but part of our a risk management approach to the fire department, and certainly we have a national standard that recommends this, is that we have to do third-party testing. So all of our fire hoses tested annually, so it doesn't burst on the incident scene. All of our ladders are tested, so when we pull people out of buildings, or we're training, or we're climbing up on roofs, that the ladder doesn't fail. That goes for both ground ladders and the aerial ladder. And then all of our pumps have to be inspected and tested as well for flow, to make sure that they flow their capacity. So that's all part of service delivery, but it does come with a cost. So you see that kind of breakdown inside of that budget. Next slide, please. Information technology in 24, so we made a big leap from a basic records management software to a more advanced records management software. The product's name is called First Do. We're, actually that's not in part of this, but that's going to be part of a discussion here later on. We need to increase our security. We meet with our IT vendor. We had about a $10,000 grant to upgrade our firewall last year. Part of that ongoing work is to look at industry best practices. We didn't, in the past, actually issue department email addresses to all of our staff, and we would kind of make them as a group and filter that to their private emails. And we found out that was a vulnerability for us, that you see some of the risks that happen out there now. So we're moving towards actually ensuring that all of our staff, regardless of their career or paid on call staff status, have Microsoft Office 365 licenses. So we pay that monthly and maintain that for those folks. But then we also have the network maintenance agreement with the preferred vendor. And we meet with them, and they are super about forecasting for us and say, here's what we think you can do better. Here's how we can keep this more secure. And they've been a great group to work with for us, but it does come at a price tag.
Just add with your Office 365 change, the way you operate now actually could take somebody's personal email and subject it to a records request. Because now you're, have town email on somebody's personal email. So.
This is what I alluded to a little bit earlier, the second bullet about the new RMS, that First Do product. We're in the process of building that out. It's taken us a little bit of a while to get that up and running. On December 1st, we started the initial data entry into that. We're training all of our staff on that. This week, we roll out the electronic patient care report, the EPCR. That product costs us, you'll see in the budget, it says about $16,000, and there's a connection fee. There's about $20,000 a year just for that RMS product. The other big number in front of you is the dispatch. We contract with Shelburne Dispatch. We had been paying a flat fee of $58,000 annually. Shelburne Police Chief, so the police department supervises that dispatch center. They sent us an email in mid-November saying that they were going to increase our rate by 15.5%. They didn't tell us the date that would occur, and they also said they were set up a meeting in the future to discuss it, and we're still waiting on a response from them to try to negotiate. We're happy to, we built some money, we built about 10% into this budget extra. No, and that was before before they sent us a letter of 15.5. So we're trying to negotiate with them on where that number is going to end up. We are the busiest agency for which they dispatch. With the exception of maybe Shelburne PD, their own agency, without external. Next slide, please. $43,000 is in your training item lines. This is really about employee development and making sure that we stay current. About 12,000 of this annually is dedicated to paramedic level education. That's been our historic allocation to taking incumbent staff and bringing them up to the paramedic level. We divide that up between the number of folks that are interested in that. And this continues with that trend that we've been following. There are some new options in paramedicine that are coming available. We just had a new program that will be offered in January of this year in South Burlington, which is independent of the Vermont State College's program. It comes at a lesser cost. Unfortunately, we have no members that are interested in attending. In addition to the paramedic, we spend about $4,500 a year. We budget for about $4,500 a year for live fire training. So we pay the State Fire Academy to use the live fire training facility down there. They have to cover their costs for instructors, equipment, consumables, all of that. So that's what it costs us to bring the department down and to do that live fire training. In as much as that we can simulate that training at the fire department with theatrical smoke, it doesn't give us the same operational proficiency that operating under heat, smoke in that live fire environment does. So I think it's money well spent. It keeps our folks fresh and prepared to address the realities of what's beyond the street instead of being practice firefighting, if you will.
Give me a really short answer of what's the difference between a EMS and paramedic.
So an EMT basic is, I would say, a basic level of provider who could stop bleeding, maintain airways, provide resuscitation, perform automated external defibrillation. The next step would be an advanced emergency medical technician. They can provide advanced airway, IV access, a number of advanced level medications, fluid resuscitation. And then the paramedic is really the gold standard of EMS, where they could provide even more complex airway management, cardioversion. They could start to really be practitioners as an extension of the physician with a host of advanced level medications to correct the illness that's sitting in front of them and the patient. So it's really what you as a community, you would prefer to see that level, that option. That's not to say that a number of our calls can't get addressed at the BLS level. Probably the most important thing that we do pre-hospitally is provide psychological first aid and reassurance. Right? When people call 911, they're not having a good day, and they just need somebody to help walk them through that. And so regardless of what the patch says or what the certification, it's that compassion and being able to help people navigate their emergency is probably one of the most effective things that we do, most rewarding things that we certainly do. But that paramedic level service is the gold standard of EMS care, the extension of the physician, the extension of the emergency department, pre-hospital.
Chief, as you talk about training, and Chief Foley talked about it too, but we're looking at finance I and the HRI. We're looking at training as a way to keep our people engaged, to keep them challenged, and to retain them. So adding dollars to training, I think, is really important, and it gives whether it's police officer or fire, the ability to make some choices in that training to something they're interested in, and that hopefully will retain them.
And there's more, there's part of this allocation for FY25 includes advanced level officer training, so we can start to increase the diversity of their thought process. So we're not always thinking about managing a fire ground, but we're also thinking about managing people and managing situations and having a more global approach to the environment that we serve.
Thank you, Shirley.
Here's my revenue.
There's right, we always like to see this side of the
Like
house.
revenue.
Right, everything else seems to, you're asked. What are we bringing back? Well, so here is what we are bringing back, and this is a true advantage of the increased staffing, is to be able to address the number of medical calls that were going on. And so we do bill, for those of you that may remember, we had a little snafu in November of last year. Our historic billing agency left us with a 2-week notice of separation, and we were without an ambulance billing agency. That forced us to quickly develop an RFP. We got that published. We had a number of vendors that came in. We chose that vendor, and we've had good luck with them. They've been a great partner for us with ECP. ECP charges 4.5% of net revenue is what they get. We've had some vendors bid that product at 8%. So not only were they the lowest, but we've had good success with them. They've worked retroactively on that time frame between November and about late February, when they really got up and running, maybe early March, to retroactively start to collect that. But it does put us at a bit of a disadvantage to be able to forecast our FY25 numbers, because we had a gap. And so this really, where Shirley worked her magic, here's where our forecasting is. And I think this is a good number for us. If we continue on this, as you saw, this 31% trend in EMS, that doesn't mean that we have a 31% increase in transports, right? So we bill on transports to move that forward. When we set the fee schedule in May, that's where we reevaluate. So we do a regional inquiry about what other ambulance services in the area charge for the different tiers. CMS allows us to bill at a basic life supports level, an ALS 1, ALS 2. So we take that, and all of those have different fees. So for the more advanced service, that paramedic level service, when we will initiate IVs and administer drugs and do things like cardioversion or manage pain, we're able to bill at that higher level.
CMS is what, Aaron?
Center for Medicaid, and I'll get it wrong.
Yes.
But
So I just wanted you to understand what that was. As we work with BCP and we get a lot more data from them, and I'm still catching up with them as well, because it's been so busy, but the data that we can provide, and like if I asked for some new data for year end, and within 4 hours they produced what I needed. So I think as we continue to work with ECP, that we'll be able to get more data. And part of that is when you look at the budget this year, we used to show like total number of calls and then transports. Now this has all been changed to just actually what those calls are that we are transporting and able to earn revenue on. But for people who are on Medicaid, I mean, we get essentially about 50% of what we bill. So, and they are a big part of, so gathering more data on that as well as we go along with ECP will be really helpful to help us budget.
just to echo that, so even though I serve as your municipal fire department, fire chief, that doesn't mean, so we're active statewide in advocating for increases in that Medicaid reimbursement rate. So I sit as the delegate for the Vermont Career Fire Chiefs to the Vermont EMS Advisory Committee. And that committee is charged annually to provide a legislative report to the state legislature. And that's one of the recommendations that we're pushing is like, we can't continue to get 50% reimbursement for a service that costs us 100%,
Right.
right? So we pushed that. We saw a bit of an increase last year, and that's going to be a common theme again this year when we hit the legislature. That draft report we'll work on the finish up that draft on December 15. So this week we meet. That's the end of the items that I had for operating. There's no questions. I was going to move into capital.
Questions from the board?
Unless it's in capital. I just remember on our tour, there was a lot of talk about communications, or was it IT? I can't remember. We were standing in the front hallway having a conversation, but I can't remember what it was.
It was likely to talk about communications that you heard Chief Foley speak of on the tower. So that tower benefits the fire department as well. So we would share space on that tower.
Okay.
So that's going to be a big item. Just for your information, we can't be in a building in Taft Corners and get outside of the building on our radios to talk to the dispatch center. So if I'm on this radio in a building in the community center, I can't get out of those buildings to talk to the dispatch center. That's kind of a big
That's a
safety
problem.
issue.
Yeah. So we have fire dispatch in Shelburne and police dispatch in Essex. Okay.
Yeah, what we were working towards was the regional dispatch
Right.
model through the Public Safety Authority, and that unfortunately has taken a pause. But part of this and us thinking how we want to evolve our dispatch from an operational level is we need to have the capital investment in the radios as well. If we were to look at potential different partners in the future and how we want to configure that, whether it's other agencies, in-house agencies, combining both in one place. It's critical that we get the infrastructure so no matter who's dispatching from any location, they can tie into our local systems. Did I summarize that right?
Yeah, perfectly. And we actually are talking about it at Chittenden County Regional Planning this Wednesday morning at 9, where we brought up, we began a survey of the agencies, again, in the county to look at county interoperability and see if we can't kind of reinvigorate that conversation about being able, there's a better model out there. It certainly comes at a cost, but it's just about getting all the people to recognize that and get back on track with some sort of a regional dispatch approach.
Sounds like we're doing our part. We're in Shelburne, we're at Essex.
Yeah, and the move to Essex, fortunately it worked out. At this budget time last year, I was sharing with the board, we had a pathway we thought to stand it up, and we had multiple conversations about what that would mean for Williston, but ultimately another town that didn't have the funding, and that kind of started a domino effect for everything. So it worked out that we were able to partner with Essex with kind of this micro regional. And
Right.
part of our thought there was to show people who might be a little hesitant to that this is a model that can work. If we have these micro partnerships, maybe they can ultimately combine to that main public safety authority, and that this happens all around the country. They know how to do it. It's 2023. We can do this stuff, but
Baby
change is slow in government.
Also, the legislature is looking at this as a statewide issue. So I think that helps put the pause on it as well, because it's trying to address this as a statewide issue and not just a Chittenden County issue.
I was going to say, when you said
That's
statewide,
the-
that's not always a benefit.
Yeah,
We also have representation on that indirectly through our partner agencies. So we meet with the Vermont Career Fire Chiefs, and we work with the Vermont State Firefighters Association, who has an industry expert that sits on that statewide commission, if you will, to really make sure that our voice is heard here locally about needing to push this forward, to advocate for it.
I'll just mention, I noticed on page 109, it's the summary for fire. our column header for FY '22, it says approved. I think that should be actual, right, Shirley? Those are the audited financials.
Oh, yes, that's true.
It's just a typo, but so those are actuals in that FY '22 column there.
Key capital items to discuss with you this year for FY '25 include the fire station paving.
Chief, is there a page that, in the books that we could?
I can tell you that it's on page 020.
Thank you.
Good.
Yep.
Again, so this is the summary slide for us. Fire station paving, the replacement of a command vehicle, firefighter turnout gear, firefighting equipment, and then at the bottom of that, Gene, especially for you, it's potential savings here for capital. So, next slide. So we deferred fire station paving. It was supposed to happen here in FY '24. This is an actual photo of our driveway out front. So we need to help get this corrected. So Bruce, we worked with Bruce Hoare of Public Works. Bruce has made the suggestion on how this gets mitigated. They're going to come in and grind this off and then retop it all. And it doesn't come without a fairly significant price tag. This is Bruce's calculation, because I certainly didn't have the expertise to figure this one out, about $36,000 to work that. And the manager's recommendation is that ARPA funds be used to do that. The next slide will show you the replacement of one of our command vehicles. So Deputy Chief Gary and myself both have these Tahoes. They're aging and certainly putting more miles on. We'd like to move forward with the replacement of the highest mile vehicle, to Chief Foley's point about trying to get a return in on that investment, so we don't have the depreciation value, and just make it that we're going to have such a gap in being able to move that forward. So this would allow us to replace that. We originally had great hopes of moving this to an EV, and we haven't yet seen a good option for us to move that forward. One of the challenges that we spoke about here internally with Manager Wells and Shirley and Aaron was that this is a response vehicle. So if we were going to be out and working on an incident scene, how would we maintain the charge status of that vehicle? We have mutual aid partners and certainly have good connections. I reached out to Burlington Fire. Their fire chief operates a little bit different than us, that he's not a responder per se. He doesn't have to answer calls because he has deputy chiefs and battalion chiefs underneath him. But he has a Mustang Mach EV. And at a recent meeting, I saw that he was not driving his Mustang. And I said, what happened? And he's like, I didn't have enough charge to get here. So it was really brought to light, like, oh, goodness, I don't know that we can take the risk right now of not having the charge in that car to have a response vehicle. But as you know, like, technology is changing every day. So if the next vehicle that we buy is not EV, that doesn't say that by the time we go to replace the next car that we won't have an EV option that's out there and has some reliability, some option.
And this is on page 60 in your binder. Our current savings there is about 67 and a half. So this would add to that savings for this next fiscal year.
Chief, it's not really a budget question, but what kind of mileage would you need a electric vehicle to be able to do between charges for the department to be able to use it?
I don't have the answer off the top of my head. I can certainly look at it. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Fire turnout gear. This is
This is page,
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't put them in the.
yep,
66?
there you go. Thank you, Terry.
Really, this is an ongoing expense for us, but I wanted just to bring it, especially for Gene and Mike, who may not have seen this before, and ask why does it cost us so much money for this turnout gear? The gear lasts, has a 10-year lifespan on it, and so when we purchase it, we put it in as 5 years as a primary set. So we will use that for 5 years, day to day, and then once it hits that 5-year mark, it goes into a reserve status. And what that allows us to do is when the primary set is out, and because it's been contaminated on its incident scene, we run it through the extractor. So that was the big washing machine that you saw in the station, the one that we're working to get replaced right now. That allows us to take that backup set and put that in there so we can work on essentially cancer mitigation by making sure our members are always in clean gear. The new paradigm for firefighting is, I don't know why we haven't thought of this before, because the culture drove up probably the ignorance, is that when we do fire suppression, when we go into a building and you think about all of the things that are within your own homes and now they're affected by fire, they've changed. So what happened to the chemicals that were stored under your kitchen counter? What happened to the other items, your sofa that was fine, but now it's a polymer-based fuel that is degraded and has a high hydrocarbon footprint. When you think about that and you look at the prevalence, we're now treating these incident scenes truly as like a hazardous materials incident, which they would have if you had a chemical spill in your home. You would have thought that. But now we go in, we put the fire out, everything's black and smoked up, and we don't think of it that way. But the new paradigm is firefighter safety needs to come first, and we need to ensure that they're always working in clean gear. So when we go to a fire, that gear comes out, we bag it in specialized bags, it gets tied up, we wear our lay clothes, our civilian uniforms, back to the firehouse, we start the laundry process, the extraction process for cleaning that gear, and we put that backup set of gear in service. So this allocation of funds allows us to keep that rotating that gear out there, and it doesn't come without a price tag, around $4,000+ to keep that gear, to buy that gear. I think it's the next page. Is it 68? Yes.
Yep.
So the last bit here is firefighting equipment. So the self-contained breathing apparatus, that's the device that you see in the photo. These run in excess of $10,000 per set. We last purchased them in 2019. They we're forecasting that these will need to be replaced. They go through a cycle with the National Fire Protection Association where they have a standard, and they usually last about 2 standards revisions before the technology comes out to say, hey, we need to increase safety, we need to increase the flow capacity, all these other features that come out there. So we need to be able to predict that when the time comes to replace these, that we have the money. So that's why there's such a big allocation there. The cylinder that you see there, that gray cylinder that contains the air, at 15 years, that goes out of service currently. Like you have to buy a new one around $1,000 a piece just for the cylinder. The next NFPA revision is actually due in 2025. We'll look to see what that looks like for the potential liability in the future for the 2025. Now I'm going to ask you to go backward for the fire IT server. $64. Thank you, Charlie. So right now we have a physical server within the fire station. And as I indicated before, we worked with our vendor to try to bring our system up to industry best practice. And what they've recommended is that we move to a cloud-based data storage. We have about 20,000, 18,800 set aside right now in fire capital for this IT storage. They're looking at to make sure that we don't have systems within the fire station right now that are tied to the physical server, such as what we have is called trip lights. So at night, when a fire alarm comes in, when an emergency response comes in, not only do the tones open up the radio within the station so we know, but the lights also come on in the station so the members know that there's a call. If we have to make sure that that is separated from that IT, from that server, in order for us to move this forward. If it is separated, or whatever the mechanism is that we have to separate that, we'll be able to remove this physical server and then go to a cloud-based service for us. And that will just be part, there won't be any added fees. So this would actually sunset. So we've got our fingers crossed as they explore that.
Okay, so now I'm confused. Are you buying a server or you're not buying a server?
We don't think we're
You
buying,
don't want a server,
we don't want one.
right? But the money's in here in case you
The
do.
money is in there because we currently have one. So this was forecasting to replace that server. And if we were to transition to a cloud base, it would essentially take us about this 19,000 to convert to the cloud.
Oh, okay.
So it would really be this count would be net zero.
And then this would move to the operating.
Operating account.
Yeah.
Can't capitalize the cloud, unfortunately.
Well, we get so much rain this year.
Too much stuff in the cloud.
This is the current ambulance that we were slated for delivery in 2023. You may remember that was delayed. Excuse me. It was slated for delivery in 2022. We took delivery of it here in 2023. Ambulance build time today is greater than 3 years. So the date of order, we won't see a truck for 3 years. So we would need to order the replacement vehicle in 2024, calendar year 2024, to have it delivered for fiscal year 27. They're looking at a 5% compounding cost. So predicted, excuse me, for a 2027 delivery, which would be fiscal year 2028, that truck would be approximately $495,000.
Plus winter tires.
Plus winter tires. Yeah, that's what yours. They're busy. They're worth it. But yeah, it's one of those gulp. How did we end up with $500,000 ambulances?
Well, Eric, I hadn't thought of that in terms of the warning. Like, it's in here in the capital budget as a 27 item, and we don't, we would debt fund it, but wouldn't we really have to have something on the warning in order to even put that purchase order in?
Chief and I chatted about that a little bit. I think where we landed, Chief, was waiting for 2025 for that to place the order. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you think we should move that up.
So there's no money exchanged at the order either,
Right.
right?
It's just that we need to have the approval to even put the order
Right.
in.
Right. We'd have to refine that with the vendor, Eric, to see. But this is what was set forward.
Yeah. Yeah. So part of that is these long lag times for equipment, and wanting approval to eventually borrow the money 3 years down the road once we deliver the equipment. So
Right.
that's kind of what we're. It's a tough spot to be in, because you used to just be able to, you get your borrowing authority, you'd order it, you get it later, that next fiscal year. So we're seeing this in a lot of different pieces of equipment right now. For the ones that we borrow money for, probably these ambulances and fire apparatus, it's probably going to be a change in just timing for the town to think about to get that authority for future borrowing that may be 2 or 3 years down the road.
Yeah. And you'll see the same on the next slide when you look at even a fire engine. 2.5 year build time for a fire engine. So it's the change, the demand, like they're just a backlog of communities waiting to sit in this queue with manufacturers.
Yeah, with the bonds too, we would go to bond sale. Typically the year we're gonna get the equipment delivered, and then that first year you can just have an interest payment, and then the following year you can start your principal payment. Certainly have the option to start your principal payment in year 1 too, but sometimes we can lag that if we want to. There's some options there.
Kick that can down the road.
Yeah.
So in 2027, this would become your new primary ambulance. The one that's currently your primary ambulance would become your backup ambulance, and the other one out the door, probably.
Yeah, so we're doing this trial run by keeping that third ambulance in reserve right now because we're watching this trend for demand for service, and we've actually seen the benefit so far.
Sure.
When these trucks have to go out for maintenance, we pull that other truck out, and that allows us to answer the concurrent EMS call. Right now, even to put the tires on that ambulance, right, it's out of service for the day, we're down to one ambulance. So when the second EMS call comes in, if we don't keep the third reserve, you can't even answer that. We can't go to that call. We can't transport that patient.
And how long do ambulances last?
I think we have it on an 8-year cycle.
I'm on a different
Yeah,
page.
8-year.
So you're getting, aren't we getting, what's something you were expected now or is shortly that's been delayed, some vehicle?
It's here.
Okay,
The
you
ambulance
need another-
came this year, was supposed to come last year.
okay. So and you need another one in 3 years?
We would need to order it for for FY '28 when it's on.
So you get one in 20, what year are we in? 24, and you need another one in 27.
It would be in '28 on that, at the halfway point, at that 4-year,
Because you got two.
Fiscal year.
fiscal year '28.
Okay.
So there's the 4
You're
year.
kind of replacing the other one, not the new one.
Correct.
Yeah.
We would replace the oldest one,
Right.
yes.
Maybe something I'll circle back with the town attorney if the board would like me to, is just think about this borrowing lag timeline, and see if it might be prudent for us to think about a question in March. If these 3-year replacements, chief, is that what we're still continuing to see? If we have the borrowing authority, we can at least set a contract for a build and delivery date, and then we would exercise the bond sale the year of delivery. I'd feel more comfortable in placing a $500,000 order if I had the.
Right. Already.
I think it makes sense. I mean, if we're ordering
Okay,
it, we're
hopefully.
committing to buying it, and if we're committing to buying it, we need approval, so.
Well,
yeah.
theoretically, you could probably cancel an order, but
But
you'd lose money on. But is there any other vehicles up for the warning this year?
No,
Then it might make sense
Not
to go ahead.
for us.
the ones we typically just bought are these fire vehicles. The other ones, like the public works vehicles, are in those sinking funds that we pay
Right.
cash for.
Right, okay.
The next slide has the fire engine.
I'm sorry, can someone point me to the page? I'm losing the vehicles.
This is not going to be anywhere other than the apparatus grid, which is at the end of there.
Oh,
Page 7.
70?
So this is slated for replacement in FY '29. And just wanted to bring to your attention that it's a 2.5-year build time. So, as we forecast this, we used to figure that these trucks were going to be around 800,000. They're forecasting that by the time we order that truck, it'll be $1.25 million for a fire engine. That would likely need to be ordered in late 2026 to be delivered in that 2029 timeframe. And this could change a little bit if the manufacturer's queue slows down the demand for production.
Aaron, your engine emissions change due in 2027. Is that going to be a capital need then? Is that something major?
So what that would mean is essentially potential changes on that end price tag for what the motor on the vehicles cost because of the emissions control restrictions that they're anticipating. We're always looking for a more green approach, and this is what they just wanted us to be aware that the emissions control standard will change in 2027, so these motors will have more emissions control, which will likely drive the price up higher.
But it doesn't mean you have to do anything. with
We
your
won't have to
current
do anything.
fleet.
No.
Okay.
It does, no. It would be anything any prospective orders.
The state right now is dangling carrots to farmers to replace their old tractors with new ones, more emissions.
What are they, with better emissions control?
Yes, new tier 1, tier 2 diesel engines.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I bought an old one.
Just
So
saying,
with all the new growth that we see at Taft Corners coming in the next 5 years, is it going to require a ladder truck, the next new fire truck?
Our ladder truck was just delivered in the last couple of years. So no, the current truck is going to be able to address that. As the buildings go up higher, the building codes become more stringent. So even though we build higher, the skeleton of those buildings has more features for us. Detection, sprinkler systems, and standpipes, and potentially fire pumps, meaning that inside of the building, they have to have the ability to get the water to the tallest part of that building within the fire code standard as it goes up. So that works in our favor. Just think about municipalities that the ladder truck isn't always necessary to reach the tallest part of it. And how do they build skyscrapers? They build it with having all of those protections within the building. Compartmentalization, so the fire stays small, the fire stays in one room, the sprinkler contains that fire to that one room, the smoke detection, the egress stairs, that has more features because they understand the risk of fire in those buildings. As they get higher, they put more fire protection in those buildings. So the current ladder truck that we have has I'm not going to say the tallest reach because there are 130-foot ladder trucks that exist out there, but it wouldn't be practical for us to have a 130-foot ladder truck. So, yeah, ours is 105.
So the new form-based buildings that the town is proposing in the growth district, whether they're 2 stories or 4 stories, they would be, everything would, I guess the code would be sufficient.
Well, now we're getting kind of into the weeds a little bit, Mike, in that the code actually doesn't hit the high-rise standard until about, I think it's an occupied story above 70 feet, or right around that 70-foot mark. So we meet, I think really that's Deputy Chief Gary's role, is to work in concert with the State Division of Fire Safety to make sure, that's why we have the Fire Safety Plan Review, which is a select board policy, to help make sure that we're active in that development process. So those buildings will have the sprinkler systems. We'll ask for something more than that, right? We'll say, for instance, if you're going to build this building, and it doesn't have a fire pump, we want to be able to connect into the sprinkler piping and the standpipe piping. The standpipe is the hose that goes up inside of the stairwells that allows us to bring our hoses up and just connect and get water out for fire suppression in the stairs and not have to bring 400 feet of hose up through the building. So we work to say we need that within 100 feet of the fire hydrant and where we're going to park our fire engine. So the person that's out running the pump can just put a hose to the hydrant and then put a hose into the building to supply that system.
That's something the town of Williston can demand, or is that state level that we have no control over?
We work to enforce your select board policy, to have them have that dialogue with. So far, we haven't got a ton of pushback on it. But all the developers, the standard doesn't change. So they say when that fire department connection has to be on the building, the designer of that, the architect of that building may say, well, I'm just going to put it over here because there's a hydrant 100 feet from it, but it's not going to be where we park the fire truck, because it would be great if we had this other 3 fire trucks staffed, and that would be not a problem, but we don't have that staffing. So we'll say, I understand that you designed it to the code, and it meets the code, but here's our limitation. We only have 1 fire engine showing up at the scene. If we only had that 1 engine, we really need that fire connection to be where we're going to park that fire truck. and the developers and the architects have been so far very receptive to our need. They just move that in the location within the building before they build it.
I would think if there was a fire in a building like that, it'd be a 3-4 alarm fire. 5-6 alarm fire.
You'd be surprised. Again, that's where it goes back to compartmentalization. So this building, as an example, right, we shut the doors every night to make sure that the fire doesn't spread throughout this building. If we can keep a fire to a small area by just shutting the doors and using that compartmentalization, it keeps the fire small. That's why we use, the level of sheetrock, if you will, or the drywall that's inside of there, or protective egress stairs have increased duration where they protect us. They have double protection, so when people get into those stairwells, that they have an area of refuge against fire. The sprinkler was never designed to fully put out the fire, but allowed the occupants to escape. The majority of the time, we can get fire suppression to the point where it doesn't extend beyond that. The challenge is the unpredictable is when a contractor comes in and puts breaches through the fire protection, right? They start drilling holes in the walls because it's easier for them to run their systems through there. That's what we need to be out and enforcing through fire inspections and site visits.
That's usually HVAC systems.
HVAC or plumbing, even IT now is just being able to run IT systems through there, right? I don't know if you've seen any of the common hallways, if you've seen any of the new construction, you'll see baskets that look like chutes on a conveyor belt, and that's just all of the IT infrastructure. The new state police barracks on top of the hill here is just full of IT infrastructure that runs through the skeleton of that building. It's impressive. I think this last slide, I just thought this was a great action shot on the highway, talking about we have a minimum staff of 5 people on duty every day. But we can't facilitate, right, to your point, if we go to the second and third alarm, we need those extra resources. We will never be robust enough to handle all of those big size emergencies. And it's partnerships like this. This is when we were covering a multi-vehicle crash. South Burlington Fire was committed on a fire. And so this is Burlington Fire and us on a car crash on the highway last year to show that, we actually cover each other here, and the resources that we have in our mutual aid partners, it doesn't need to be Burlington, Essex Junction, Richmond, Heinsberg Fire, and South Burlington. We all rely on each other for those large responses. And this is just kind of showing that. Yeah, we couldn't even see the highway to try to get back. We could not. It was one of the scariest nights ever.
Look, they're all smiling.
Yeah. How bad could it have been? They're all smiling.
Yeah.
Gene noticed.
So, yeah. And people's, that's the nice part about the job is that they take pride in what they do, and I think that's why they're smiling.
Yeah.
And the last slide that you see should be just the question slide. Questions?
I think I interrupted you to ask all my questions.
As you should. No? Okay.
All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chief. And thanks for, please express our gratitude to the department.
Absolutely. Will do.
When my tool shed caught on fire, I was amazed how quickly you all got there and how many of you there were.
Yeah, that was
I think the Air National Guard had there as well.
Tanker, and Richmond. You folks did most of that.
I was busy.
The neighbors did, right?
Yeah, John and I. truck won't start, tractor won't start. We were busy.
Moved a lot of snow.
But it wasn't enough. You guys got it out inside, you know?
I won't be as
Oh, yeah.
long with your 5-year, I guarantee it.
With my what?
5-year outlook.
I was grateful to see you guys.
Yeah, take care.
Yeah.
I'm just proud of myself because I brought my own capital budget with me this time. And I think I went 2 years in a row. Oh, yeah, I'm doing capital today too. Shirley, yep.
Hey, Matt.
How you doing, Mike?
Good, yourself?
Good.
I think it's a busy tree day today.
And who's
Better to
there?
get it now before they all get wet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think today, excuse me?
Who's there helping you?
Oh, I got my wife and three people working.
Are you having people cut trees this year?
Yes.
Yeah.
I sold 10, I think 10 yesterday afternoon in about an hour. Open.
Saw a bunch. I've got
Perfect, thanks.
I've got a cat that was a kitten last year who's now a 14-pound.
And as part of his presentation this morning after the very large planning and zoning budget that he has to walk through to spend most of his time on his growth report that he worked on with Emily Heyman, our fellow planner in the department.
Hey, it's tough. Like, not only is it not nearly as interesting as fire trucks and police, everything they were doing through, but it's right before lunch.
I know. I'm between the fire department and lunch
Lunch.
with my 4% of the town budget. But as Eric said, I'm going to work through the budget stuff fairly efficiently, answer any questions you have, and then talk a little bit about this growth report that we've been doing the last couple of years and this year's version of it for you. So
Great.
just start with the planning and zoning operating budget. We set our revenue projections a little bit lower this for the upcoming fiscal year, just based on what we think our current and recent past experience has been. Fee revenue, tracks with the economy, tracks with just sort of volume of activity in the town. And I think it's just been a little bit more volatile lately because the projects that generate large permit fees are really large projects, and they just kind of happen in their own time. So, you get a big commercial project like a U-Haul site development, or the site development next door to U-Haul. We just took in the quote unquote big permit for that. And you just never know. Those might start, 3 years before construction. They start conceptual permitting and work in front of the DRB, and then you're not sure when that big permit, that big fee is going to come in. So we just wanted to be a little bit more conservative about the revenue side of what we see in the planning office there.
Can we change fees? Wasn't that one of the first things I did? We changed the fee structure or something earlier?
Yeah. So for the current fiscal year, what the select board changed, the most fundamental change was to put more residential projects into the flat fee category. Really trying to reflect the level of effort and labor it takes the staff to review those. Someone can do a very expensive finished basement or kitchen remodel that happens to move a wall and require a permit, and it really requires almost a handful of minutes of staff time to process that. So we were charging some higher fees on those things that we've dialed back. We balanced that with some sort of different tiered fees around some of the DRB and form-based code reviews that are a little bit higher. And we also, not quite related to permits, but we firmed up the ability on large projects for us to ask the applicant to pay for the legal review related to planning, which they've always done on the legal review related to public works matters like, new public streets or sidewalks, but not some of the other legal review that we're going to be getting into, especially as we start enforcing affordable housing covenants and things like that. So we've taken some of that cost that's just been coming out of our operating budget and pushed it into a fee category. So we'll keep monitoring that and see if we've struck the right balance there. But all of that plays into that revenue picture. On expenditures, our budget does not change fundamentally year to year, but everything gets a little bit more expensive. So my first two categories where there's some kind of an increase are training and conferences and subscriptions and dues. Training and conferences is necessary to maintain certification for our currently 3 and maybe eventually 4 American Institute of Certified Planners. They need to do about 16 hours of training per year, 32 every 2 years on a variety of topics, including legal, ethics, sustainability, and equity now are all included in that. We get a really nice training package through the American Planning Association and our local chapter here at the Vermont Planners. So that's what that's for. We do also use that budget to offer training to members of the various boards and committees that the department staffs. So we are willing to take a committee member and send them to town fair or some other local training opportunity that's going to help them do their jobs. And we've had a few take advantage of that. So that's what that category supports. Subscriptions and dues are going up a little bit as well. Those folks who are certified planners get that certification pay to maintain it through the American Planning Association. We also maintain some GIS, Geographic Information System certification for the folks who are good at doing all of the computer mapping that we do. And then lastly, we're working to return to sort of our pre-COVID budget around professional services. This is where we've typically contracted either for some of our planning help, but mostly document storage and scanning as we move into making more and more of our records available digitally online and eventually transition to a more digitally based and interdepartmental permitting system. So you heard a little bit from Chief just before me talking about some of the interaction with developers and really getting into the nitty gritty of site plan review. And in the next couple of years, we really anticipate needing a more robust software package that lets us share pending permits with especially fire and public works in a way where we can all see what each other is doing rather than burning up shoe leather and tire rubber between the buildings, trying to pin each other down. Hey, have you had a chance to talk to this developer about the width of their driveway or the location of the FDC? We'd like to move that into something that's more accessible in real time and also accessible by the applicant so they can understand, oh, my permit application is still marked incomplete and I understand why and I understand who I need to talk to finish that up. So that's where we're headed there, but we do still have a bit of scanning to do. I take as a model my home city and our neighbor of South Burlington. I was recently demonstrating their document storage system to a coworker saying, here's some things about it I like and don't like. I said, let's put my address in. And lo and behold, there was a new record, and it was the 1968 sewer connection permit for my house. And in 15 years, I've never known where the sewer line really was. And really just putting in my address, there was this picture that the fellow had drawn when they put that in. I said, well, that's great. Now I know where to dig if something goes wrong.
Well, now you know where they planned it to be.
Yeah. That is really useful and provides some service. That's what we're really working towards on there. And then finally, maintaining our budget around miscellaneous planning studies. This is where we support our Unified Planning Work Program assistance we get from the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, as well as other outside help. FY25, at the very beginning of FY '25, we anticipate doing the last bit of work on the town plan that we're working on right now, which will be the document design and publication and, you know, really making that plan as accessible and usable as possible to citizens and decision makers going forward. So we want to make sure we have a little bit of funding in there to do that work, so we have a really attractive, usable town plan that, you know, will then exist for 8 years and be out there. So that's what most of that's about. Pause for a second. Any questions on the planning department operating budget?
Where was the, so didn't you use a consultant to help with the 2050 rollout?
Yes, so we used some of our planning studies money in FY '23 to support a municipal planning grant application, which we were successful in receiving. And the consultant services that we're using right now take us through the public engagement phase of the town plan. So all of those roundtable events, the survey inputs that we're getting, the maps that people have put stickers on, North Star Planning, our consultant is compiling all of that. They're going to produce what's called an engagement report that says, here's what everybody told us about the town plan. We should have that in the late winter. And then the Planning Commission and Select Board and others can use that report as something to refer back to as we start identifying all of the goals, objectives, and policies in that plan draft.
So is that in planning studies, or are you telling me it was paid for by a grant?
The match came out of planning studies, and then the grant is extra. So I think it's about a $32,000 project with $26,000 coming from the grant and the balance coming from our planning studies line item. Anything else, or I'll move on to capital? Sure.
No, yeah.
So capital, what I'm here to talk about comes out of our conservation planning function. And there are two sheets. They should be pages 48 and 49 in the capital improvement program. Starting page 48, these are items related to the Catamount Community Forest. So you'll see the items running out: 2025, $2,500, 2026, $7,500, 2027, $20,000, et cetera, leading to a total in here of $55,000. And the major projects upcoming at Catamount are dealing with the new access trail from Governor Chittenden Road to the southern Catamount parcel. This takes the access away from the it being adjacent to the home that's off parcel. There's some stream crossing structures that need work on some of the existing trails. And then further out in the future, and we always kind of, you know, sort of puzzle over what to do with this, the issue of the sheep barn. This is a structure that's on the town property that's part of Catamount. It's a historic structure that cannot, you know, on a regulatory sense, simply cannot be removed. But it's difficult to find a use for it that would really justify investing a lot of money in fixing it up. That said, we leave it out there as a question mark and a budget item should the town decide that that's worth doing. You know, we can do some, it's kind of like the Brennan Barn for folks who are familiar with the town's interactions with the Brennan Barn over the years. You spend some money to keep it standing, and you kind of, you know, that at least lets you make a different decision about full restoration later on rather than just letting it fall down. So that's the sheep barn item there. Any questions about what's up at Catamount?
Unless you're proposing we get sheep.
Use them for invasive species removal. Maybe a goat herd is
There you go.
Properly trained.
Yeah. You know, you have to get them plant identification trained to selectively remove things. The other capital items are on page 49, just on the very next page. This is the Town Trail Management Fund. So this is what we use for facilities in all of our country parks. And you see some upcoming projects there working on the Schmoker Trail Boardwalk, and then more of puncheon work in Mud Pond, puncheons being those wooden structures that keep you from getting your feet wet and muddy in the wet and muddy portions of the trail. So I know this fall, they pulled a bunch of old pressure-treated puncheon out and have started some of that replacement work at Mud Pond.
A new word for me.
Yeah.
Learned something new today.
You know,
Learned what a
it's been-
fen was on Thursday night, but now I know what a punch is.
Now you got a fen, you got puncheons to cross the fen. Yeah, so, you know, this has been really terrific for us to just keep this capital fund going. And we do have a prioritized townwide trail inventory and assessment that was prepared for the town in 2020 by SE Group. So we have our to-do list of projects. We kind of, you know, we'll just keep working through them, dealing with the most pressing and important ones over time, using the funds that go into this, you know, across the next 5 years, total $102,500 fund. We've really, it's been really terrific working with trail maintenance in this capital fund, and going back to operating for a second, where we do have our seasonal trail stewardship position. You know, we've been very lucky to have Ann, the same person for the last couple of years, doing that work for us. And for, you know, just a few $1,000s to have one person who goes out during the summer and is focused on trail maintenance and mowing and being responsive to citizen concerns we get when something's not right, really lets us keep doing the work we do in the office, knowing that those things are taken care of, and knowing that we've got some feedback into how to prioritize our capital efforts out there.
Something we'll touch on too with recreation and parks this afternoon is our recreation impact fee is sunsets in 2025.
End of 25,
renewal. So we'll look to do a study to extend that fee, thinking about that coming up. And part of what we've talked about is that fees covered our community parks, but not our country parks. So we could think of how to encompass in that impact fee study, the country parks as well, and coming up with a new impact fee there. And we have this really great plan that was done a couple of years ago. So having that revenue stream from impact fees might help us also look to tackle some of these in a shorter term, as opposed to just general fund and grants that we receive.
And I won't list all through it, but if you're in your capital program binder, starting on page 38, there's a list of recent and pending projects related to the country parks there. So you sort of see a summary of the work plan that we're working under with that funding. Do I have that right, that it's in your capital binder?
Yeah,
We only have
Should
one
look like
binder.
that.
38, yeah.
Yeah, okay, good.
Simon.
I printed excerpts, so I don't have the content. I didn't want to make a whole one just for today. So if there's not any questions about that, I'll move into the fun part, the growth report.
This, just one question on the, where's the, when do we talk about the fund that we put money in for buying property?
Yep, the ERF.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's in the outside services, but
and we're talking about using ARPA funds this year, but, so it wouldn't be in here, right?
that's part of it's in the outside services operating budget. But certainly if there's a question about it, Matt's office helps oversee that as well.
Sure.
Well, I learned on Thursday night when I went to the thing that they threw around some numbers, which I thought was really helpful for someone who's a number person, that there's a certain number of parcels they have their eyes on, and if they wanted to purchase them all over 10 years, paying about half of what they think they're worth, it would be $150,000 a year, if I have that right. Does that ring a bell?
Yes. You know, fundamentally a lot more than is typically put into
Right,
the
right.
ERF. And two things about that. One would be, I think there's a real opportunity as we write this next town plan to talk about what the town's long-term strategy might be around purchasing open space and how to do it and how to prioritize it. That said, there is a really good priority parcels list. You might remember when we talked about the Glazer project, we said, well, it's on the priority list. It's number 39. And there are other parcels that are, you know, back beyond that are undeveloped that, you know, you still might want to purchase if the opportunity came up. But they showed, this was at the Wild About Williston event, there was a bar graph showing annual contributions to the Environmental Reserve Fund, sort of, you know, starting in around 1992. And, that's gone down a little bit. I'll caution that graph was not inflation adjusted. If you did that, the trend goes down, quite a bit more. And of course, if we graphed the cost of land per acre, that's gone up. And that said, when we use the Environmental Reserve Fund, we're usually using it to leverage other money.
Right.
We're usually not using it entirely towards the purchase price of something. And, that's an important part of that strategy too. So money's important, but also the robustness of having, a conservation planner and a conservation commission that can work and make those partnerships with those other organizations that were in the room Thursday night, like the Trust for Public Land and Vermont Land Trust. All of that helps us achieve those land conservation goals.
I drafted the number certainly lower than I'd like it to be. I put it at $10,000 just based on where the bottom line was. Being a discretionary reserve fund for the board to allocate funds to, certainly up to you as you want to finalize this budget, where you want that number to land. And to Matt's point, thinking with the next town plan, how we want to fund that moving forward. Every year it's been basically a general fund allocation that gets transferred into that reserve fund. Certainly a lot of different ways to think about that in the future, but where we had a lot of expense pressures, I dialed back the discretionary reserve just as I was putting the bottom line together. But certainly that, I don't want people to think that reflects upon a negative opinion I have on that fund. It's a great tool the town has to just try to balance the budget. There's a lot of lines to look at here.
And right now, there's what, 470,000?
470,000, and I think we have that invested in CDs and money market funds, so get returns from that as well.
All right.
Okay.
Well, let's talk about some predicted growth. So the first thing I want to call out about the memo you received is this is the third year staff has prepared a memo like this, trying to make some educated guesses about how much new growth and development is going to be coming to the town over the 5-year life of that capital plan that you look at, and gives you some more context when you're thinking about budgeting, although we don't really talk directly in this memo about budget impacts of this growth. I can answer some general questions about that. This being the third year we've done this, it's also the first year that we decided to take a look back and see how our predictions were bearing out. And, if you've read the memo, I say it a couple different ways, that our predictions are generally overly optimistic. We tend to predict growth faster than it actually shows up. And we've tried to adjust our predictions a little bit based on sort of our experience of, how long from DRB or site plan approval to actual occupancy does it really take in a lot of these projects for things to kind of get going, and what is their typical pace once they do get going. So we tried to adjust some numbers in the per project tables that are in this memo based on some of those experiences. Also acknowledging that, we're in a pretty remarkable environment right now. We're a couple years out from COVID. Interest rates have more than doubled in the last couple of years. Cost of labor, materials, and land have all gone up. And, that's going to show up a couple ways. It shows up in the, vast over prediction of new growth that we made for last year. We're halfway through just about FY24, where we thought we would see, pretty significant number of new units, 172 for FY24. But as I wrote this memo, we'd only seen 10 so far come in the first half of the year. Things are really slow right now. Things are really slow, but there's quite a lot of projects that are sort of in the works that could get going over the next couple of years, and that could gain some momentum over the next couple of years. That's what those tables are about in this memo. So using all of that information, and also in the background, knowing that the average household size in Williston is continuing to decrease. So we lose people from town because households get smaller. And that erodes some of the number of people in total we might experience new in town over the next 5 years. So The top line takeaway, these predictions lead to an estimate of 625 more homes and 920 more people in town over the next 5 years. That's about just a hair over 2% growth across those 2% annual growth across those 5 years, which is a little faster than we saw 2010 to 2020, which is about 1.64%. If I had to guess, is my 2.1% a high or a low estimate? I think it's still a high estimate. Just not all projects even get off the ground. We assume in this estimate that they do. So something to think about there. And then thinking about commercial growth, based on what we have, at least site plan or preliminary site plan approval for and what's in the works, about 300,000 square feet of building footprint and about 430 PM peak hour trips coming online in terms of commercial growth. PM peak hour trip is a vehicle trip in or out of a new development that happens during the busiest hour between 4 and 6 PM Monday through Friday. So when everything else is at its busiest in Williston, this is how much busier the new development makes it. And so it's here not because I'm expressing a really significant concern about new traffic from commercial growth, but it's just a way of measuring intensity. When you talk about PM peak hour trips, it helps you understand that a 300,000 square foot mini storage building is very different from a 100,000 square foot retail store. One brings a lot more intensity, a lot more demand for service to the town than the other, and it's not always directly related to their size. So context for that square footage number. So as I said, we've overestimated in our prior predictions. Our 2021 prediction said we thought in FY23 we'd see 200 more units. We saw 38. Our FY24 prediction was 172, and so far we've seen 10. We're in a lull right now. And then I mentioned that discussion of demographic change and shrinking household size. So, the thing to think about to understand that is if no new dwellings were built in Williston starting today, the population of Williston in total would decline. Kids move away, they don't come back. People have more and more spare bedrooms. Households get smaller. It's just reflective of the demographic change that we have happening in town. And that said, what we're seeing for new growth, if you were to look at some of these projects and think about what they look like, the trend continues towards smaller homes and more homes that are part of some kind of multifamily structure, whether that's a row home with 2 or 3 or 4, or an apartment building with 40 or 50 or 60 units in it. We're seeing more of our new homes are coming online in that sort of pattern as opposed to single family homes on lots. So that's that. As the board is, I'm sure, quite aware, the world has changed a little bit in Williston around our growth management system. We now have this inclusionary zoning path that's an alternate path around growth management in our bylaw that may change things a little bit. You're not seeing that reflected in these projections yet, just because we haven't really had anybody propose anything under those new standards yet. But we don't think it's going to fundamentally change sort of the rate of projects coming in or the rate of units coming online. Some of that remains to be seen in the next couple of years. Casting that against sort of the reality that they're not making any more land in Williston. So the easier parcels to develop continue to be developed. The harder ones continue to sit there, and there's fewer and fewer of them every year. So there is also some natural limitation that when you start looking at the map, and Melinda had a great map when we talked about inclusionary zoning, showing, remaining large developable parcels in the residential zoning district, and there's less and less land out there for development to happen on, and we're more likely to see that shift to redevelopment or multifamily on small parcels or infill development. So the first table 1 in this memo is the growth management demand. So you've seen a version of this pretty recently. And it goes nicely with the map on the next page showing the growth management areas. Demand to build homes in the green part of town, the agricultural rural residential zoning district, is very low. There's not a lot of new homes coming online out there, very much by design of the town's growth management system, but also its zoning and also its more assertive pursuit of conservation easements and open space protections in that part of town. So I would look at all of that, that only 11% of what's being made available has been requested out there as a good thing. The town's planning is working well there. In the growth center, similarly, we're closer to 60% of what's available being requested for new dwellings there. Again, we're in a bit of a lull, and this is, multifamily is a new development type for folks to start thinking about in places like Taft Corners. The form-based code is new. There are some projects coming through the pipeline now that will, develop there, but it's still not nearly the full amount the town's planned for. And then you see that humongous number in the middle, the sewer service area outside the growth center. So this is our residential zoning district and our village zoning district. Lots and lots of projects wanting to build way more units than the 20 unit per year limit can really support. That's just kind of the last couple of big parcels like Glazer, like Summerfield, portion of Catamount Golf Course, coming in with, somewhat denser projects than people were building when they were building places like Bretton Woods and Southridge. And also we're seeing those projects being scheduled out over a much, much, much longer period of time. And we'll reflect that in the prediction tables coming up.
What are these little buildings on the map?
So little buildings on the map represent projects, new residential projects. And this was for the 5-year period of 17 to 22.
Oh.
So each of those little buildings is some kind of residential either structure or residential subdivision approval. Like there's one black building in the bottom corner of the red part of the map in the growth center that represents new dwellings at Cottonwood Crossing. And the size of those buildings is scaled to the number of dwellings that are in them. So you see more buildings and big projects happening in Cottonwood, Finney, My Lot Realty project at the corner of Night and Day Lane is another one of those larger ones there. And then if you were to go into the yellow part of town, there's two little clusters of lots of little ones representing the Northridge project and the Creek's Edge project that came online during that 5-year period. And then, of course, you see little tiny ones out in the green part of town. Each of those is one single family home. So sense of scale of where they're distributed. And then if we just did one little house for each thing happening in the growth center, they would overlap each other and we would fail to communicate. Sort of that's where new dwellings are really being created in Williston. The great volume of them is being created in the growth center. Good thing we named it the growth center.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think generally just a positive takeaway that, good planning and decisions the town has made are bearing out the way the town wanted them to. So then table 2 is the prediction table. So those top line predictions for number of people and homes come from the sums on this table, where we really actually look at the projects that are in the pipeline and try to make some predictions about when sort of certain portions of those projects are likely to come online. So starting up in the top of the table, the orange rows are the growth center rows. You see some attempt to predict what more might come on from Cottonwood Crossing, starting near the top. Finney Crossing at the very top has one last residential building. We predicted 40. We've been in communication with them recently. It's actually probably going to be 38 instead of 40. Still might be something that would come online in FY28. Cottonwood has one residential building they're about to occupy probably in January. You've all probably seen it under construction. And then they'll really be moving into a different phase of the project that they're likely to be reworking a little bit based on the form-based code and meeting some different design standards. And we really don't have a good prediction on that. We know those units are available in the growth management system. They've been allocated. We know that Cottonwood owns some of the sewer allocation necessary to build that stuff. But there may be a pause just related to them thinking about, well, what all do we really want to build here? What's working in there? So that I could easily see that pushing back. The annex project is the new residential project just getting underway with infrastructure in the last month on the former Essex Alliance Church parcel. The total unit estimate here for the next 5 years is one of the bigger numbers on the table, 172. Imagining the first of those coming online in fiscal 26. And the way we came up with these numbers is we imagined some single family and townhome elements of the project building, and then one of the big apartment buildings in the project building each of those first 2 years. So that's how we get to 66 for those first 2 years, and then it tails off a little bit. And then we have at the bottom line of the growth center, the 3JT mixed use building. This is a proposed 6-story building in the form-based code district. It would be basically the front lawn of the TD Bank building between that building and Route 2A. We're going under project review committee meeting for that next week on Friday, but it's a 59-unit residential building with a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units. And it's actually also proposing that 20% of those units be perpetually affordable at 80% of the area median income, or 12 units. So if that continues to move forward successfully, we thought that might show up as occupied in FY27, beginning of FY27. When we move into the sewer service area outside of the growth center, you see some project names you probably recognize there, and maybe 1 or 2 you don't. You all know about the Glazer project, and given that their approval would very specifically be about number of units they could build in a year, we've just used that number, assuming that occupancy might start around FY27, and we'd see those 18 per year come online. Summerfield is that former Catamount Golf project, and again, we just sort of assign 10 and then 15 units coming online per year after that. I will note that these numbers of units per year are a little high compared to what we typically experience from our development community. So Creek's Edge is the most recent project that built the very, very fastest, and it was more like 10 or 12 a year out there. Northridge, the other most recent project, has been fundamentally slower than that with its 39 units. Northridge has about 5 units left to build at this point, and we predicted of those we might see the final 4 come online in FY25 during the period of this estimate. Other projects, Michaud, you might recognize. It's the one south of Mountain View Road that would connect through to Meadow Run with its street. It's got a big for sale sign in front of it right now. We've spoken with some folks who are interested in moving that project along, so we do expect it to go, but there's been a bit of delay there. And McCullough is actually the parcel right adjacent to Michaud that is coming just into pre-application review with our DRB in it's either next week or 2 weeks from now. I can't remember. So another small residential project there, and hence our prediction. And then down in the outside sewer service area, effectively the agricultural, rural, residential area, you see we have a mix of 1 and 2 unit projects, and we've sort of tried to figure the build out there. And the one thing I'll just say across all of those projects is when people do these sort of 1 lot or 2 lot create 1 or 2 new lots through a subdivision, in the ag rural district where you need to drill a well, you often need to build a significant driveway and build a septic system. All of those things are quite expensive. Building new homes in the ag rural district is quite expensive, and we tend to see these lots get created, and then it's very difficult to predict when they will actually build. It can happen right away after the subdivision is platted. It can sit for 5 or more years. And collectively, that just means you experience a little trickle of single-family homes out there every year. So that's what that prediction reflects there.
Are all of the 27, 28, 29 projection in the sewer service area outside the growth center? We need a new name, by the way. Have any of them already received their DRB allocation? Because it's more than 20 in any given year, so.
Yeah, so Summerfield has most of its allocation, will be returning to seek the rest of it this year.
Okay.
And the Michaud project has all of its, and obviously Northridge has its. And what these units per year projections reflect is when we think someone will
Right.
actually build.
Yeah.
Most of these units had a window where they could have started building several years ago, but haven't, either, because the infrastructure's not gotten off the ground or the unit's not been sold. I think, for example, Northridge's actual growth management allocation would have allowed the whole project to have been done 2 or 3 years ago. They didn't get off the ground nearly that fast, and they didn't build nearly that fast. And that's actually our typical experience. We used to have a much stricter window of approval around growth management where units expired.
Right.
You had to go back to the DRB to reactivate them. That we recommended, and the select board at the time changed the bylaws around that, because what we found was most people need a bigger window to build in than that 5 or even sometimes 10 years. And it was an awful lot of work to hold those public hearings just to say, okay, you can still build it. You've got another 5 years. So we gave up maybe a tiny bit of predictability by doing that, but it gave people a lot of flexibility. And, the truth is the build out of what gets allocated in growth management or planned for or approved is really, really lumpy. And it's based on factors that go way beyond what the town controls. Any other questions about the residential build out? And then I'll touch on commercial real briefly. Great. So, I talked a little bit at the beginning about predicting new commercial development. One thing right off the bat to understand is that some commercial developments take years to work through review and approval and to actually go and build. And there might be something that comes in the door tomorrow that's not on this table that I don't know about that's, in the ground a year from now. It's a little bit more difficult to predict. But the table you have in this section is everything we know about that is anywhere from, underway and likely to occupy starting in FY25 to, we've had a pre-application or some kind of preliminary review. So, you see a mix here of commercial and industrial projects, still quite a few industrial projects, or, projects in the industrial district, like, car dealership type things and things like that. The biggest things we'll see in terms of square footage are mostly industrial. The GPA LLC site, this is 3 large industrial spec buildings coming online in the next couple of years, adjacent to the big U-Haul. On the other side of U-Haul is the project we refer to as more U-Haul. It's under construction right now. It's a big storage building. The exception to the square footage happening in industrial would be if you look at square footage of total floor area, the hotel going up at Finney Crossing right now is actually a pretty big building. It's got a 15,000 square foot footprint and 4 stories. So that's 60,000. And that's underway right now as well. Any other questions about any of these projects, or, if you want me to take a guess about what else might show up, I can, but it'll be a guess. Okay. Everybody usually wants to know about Aldi. Is it really happening?
What about the Friendlies that just got sold?
So the Friendlies that just got sold, nobody's asked us any specific questions yet about what they want to do with it. in a general sense, we think that it's likely that someone will remodel the building that's there and reuse it for a similar use. The form-based code allows you to take a building like Friendly's that's not conforming to the current code. You know, it's not pulled up on the street, it's not multi-story, all of those things. It allows you to take a building like that and add an addition of up to 20% of the floor area and just kind of continue to have it without having to, you know, move the whole thing or demo the building. The sense I get from the commercial realtors we worked with on that was there was more interest out there from folks who would do something like that, or a remodel and a reuse, probably as a restaurant, then there was interest from somebody who said, I'm gonna, you know, bulldoze the site and start from scratch. It is under the form-based code, but really under any zoning at all, that's a tough lot to redevelop. It's got a funny shape, it's got a lot of street frontage, not a lot of depth, and access from two state highways that the state would probably never approve today, you know, because they're uncontrolled left turn accesses, and you've probably experienced somebody making that uncontrolled left turn across Route 2. Not a lot that V-Trans can do about it because it's there, but if somebody went in and fully redeveloped it, there might be an in there. So it's more likely on a site like that that's difficult to redevelop that someone's just going to kind of recycle it.
What about Maple Fields?
Interesting question. Most of those come with a fueling a gas station. Gas stations, because of their drive-through nature, are so functionally difficult to approve under the code that they're basically not allowed. So if you're going to do something where the product involves driving through, that drive-through element has to be completely screened from the public right-of-way by the building. And Friendly's, the building is essentially at the back of the site. So what you can't do is just go put a pump island on the front of the site and turn it into a gas station, because that would be not compliant with the code.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Keep thinking, Mike.
Well, the group that bought it, that's what they do.
Any other questions about growth? My closing thought on this is we give you these numbers. We don't give you a lot of discussion about how these numbers might actually relate to budget and demand for service from the town. And I'll just note that, what we see and what we think is that depending on which department you're talking to, having more people in town means something very different. If you've spoken, with our public safety folks who are spending an awful lot of time dealing with retail theft at box stores, there's basically no connection between the number of people who live in town and retail theft at box stores. So that there's not a big change in demand. Somebody like the library may very well have a more of a sort of a scaled relationship between, well, if there's this many people in town, this is the kind of demand for service the library is going to see. In the planning office, population of residents, if it was all single family homes, we'd have more permits for pools and decks and kitchen remodels. When it's more multifamily, we have less. So more people might change what we see, but what kind of home they live in might be more the difference there. So we don't really talk about that a lot here, but when you're thinking about, well, oh, there's this new big something coming to town, and you're thinking about your budget, it's worth thinking about, well, what does that mean in terms of demand for service and therefore budget in the town? Different things are going to relate to the town really differently that way.
Kind of our goal with thinking more about data here, Mac's office's work, and I've asked them to put this together the last couple of years to help us start to think that way and think how is this going to affect our ability to deliver services. So I'd like us to get to a point where we have a real good analytical model where we understand these different impacts in different parts of town and how that's going to affect services. So we can take that proactive approach, whether it's adding new police officers, new firefighters, additional planner, library staff, things of that nature. I don't think it'll be perfect, but I think we can be innovative and creative and think about that, and hopefully start to do some data work, maybe getting a graduate level intern to help us unpack some of those ideas will help start building some models out there.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll get out of the way and you can go have lunch.
I had Sarah scheduled for 12:45. I can text her to see how much time you want for lunch.
How much
She
time do
won't,
we
usually
want?
doesn't take very long.
How much time do we want for lunch? Scheduled for a half hour. Is it acceptable to people?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell Sarah to come closer to 1, and she's usually fairly quick, then Bruce will be here to take up the public works stuff.
Great.
She told me.
So we will adjourn for until 1 o'clock.